Do we have anything we want to add or omit from the agenda?
I don't think so.
Well, we have, Frank, you have a red line
Yep.
version?
I got it.
So, those would be the items.
Okay. So we need to amend to include,
Well, this is, yeah.
we're going to continue, is it Gracie? Gracie at 180 Central Ave at the, I guess they're all at 620.
Do you want me to, no, we gotta open in that, then I'll continue.
Yeah,
on
so
trying to
we're
get
going to
them
be
out of the
doing
way.
some continuances, and then we're going to take DPW out of order. And then I'm going to take a minute and just update some folks on our Trails meeting.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the agenda with the amendments.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
She isn't here, so,
The 10
He's the normal seconder.
yes.
Yeah. And just for this evening, everybody's got a fairly tight schedule here, so what we're going to try to limit, we'll limit each meeting or each hearing to 10 minutes for the applicant to explain their projects, 10 minutes for the commission to make comment, and 10 minutes for the audience. At the max, we're hoping that there'll be less than that. It's a hot summer night and we'd like to get things wrapped up, so.
Okay,
all
so
right.
I'm gonna continue. I make a motion to continue 178 Central Ave to August 20th at 6:20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a motion to continue 180 Central Ave to August 20th at 6:20.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank
Thank
you.
So then we have an RDA Farkas and Downing, 7 Oliver Street, an open deck. So on August 6th, 2018 at 6:30. I have this one.
It's on the street side. I don't see a problem with that.
I don't think I have an RDA. I do, sorry.
Do you have it?
Got it.
Okay.
On August 6, 2018, at the 6:15 meeting, the Town of Scituate Conservation Commission will act on the request of Jeffrey T. Farkas and Sarah Downing for determination of applicability of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Scituate Wetland Bylaw to construct an open deck with sonotubes on property located at 7 Oliver Street, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
Proposed deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering Company, representing the owner and applicant. The existing house on this property is shown in brown on the plan, and the front, the existing open deck on the front is shown in blue stripe. This house was actually raised and reconstructed about 5 or 6 years ago. What they're proposing to do is to install an open deck on sonotubes at the rear portion of the yard, which is shown in blue. The top of the piers would be at least 2 feet above the ground, as it's on a barrier beach. The deck is approximately 1 foot from the property line. The decks can go right to the property line in this district. And there will be a new set of stairs coming down on the right side of the house to replace the ones that are in back of the house at the present time. So with that, I'll end and answer any questions you may have.
The shed will be removed.
Yes, the shed's going.
You have openings, you wrote on the deck so you can get to the septic.
To the tanks, to the pump chamber, right. The leaching field's in the front yard of the house, and the tanks are in the back.
It's got quite a ways to go.
It's a tight lot.
Right, in case you want to see it. Okay, I'm all set, Paul.
Doug?
No questions for Paul. I have one for the board, just for consistency. Do you normally do open decks, this applies more for some other hearings we have coming up, but the open decks count for impervious areas? Do you count those?
We have not.
You have not, okay.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that this is it's just a deck, I don't have a problem with it at all, but it's within the flood zone, it's not raised above the flood elevation, that's not a problem.
That's a good question. The deck is not above the flood elevation.
The house isn't either, so it's, I don't,
Because the flood zone changed after they built it.
well,
The first floor of the house is 12.3, and the deck could be 6 inches below that.
Sure,
yeah. I mean, it's just a deck. It's-
right.
And water can flow.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem. This is just a question for how you
Yeah.
guys normally,
Right,
Was there a deck
Address
there
those.
before, or is this a new deck?
new deck.
Deck.
No, this is a new deck.
We haven't done that with
Decks.
decks.
Okay.
We've allowed them to be impervious. We could ask that the decks have spacing, an 1/8 of an inch or
Water's going.
3/16
It
of an
does.
inch, or something
Yeah.
between the deck
Yeah.
boards. But,
would. All right.
It's all
Good.
sand below it anyway.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Good question, though.
All right.
Lisa? That's a
No more
question.
Nope.
Amy?
No.
Okay. Anybody in the audience for Oliver Street? So Paul, these are sonotubes. They'll be excavating, obviously pouring, backfilling. And it's all just sand now. There's no vegetation there.
No, it's sand. They've been using that as the backyard, and they want to come up off the ground.
Sure.
The top of that deck's going to be about 4.8 feet above the ground.
Right. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
I make a motion for -3.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amy,
Thanks.
what's a -3?
Oh,
So that's good.
Yeah, but I mean, I got a -2 when I was in front of the commission. I don't know what.
because
Okay.
that's where you're located.
I'll explain to you later.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
That's also in
so it looks like we.
Yeah.
all the different
Why don't you,
negatives.
Give your trails update, and we'll go right into Dan.
Okay. Yeah, we did tell the DPW that we'd jump them up.
And we can take some other stuff out of order too.
Sure.
on the agenda.
Yeah. Dan, are you ready to go?
Yeah. We've done this
If I
before.
get brought with my bag, I could show you.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Why don't you go ahead and set up?
Sure.
Oh, this is an interesting. Hey, Dan.
So on August 6, 2018 at 6:40 PM, actually, we can't.
Yes, yeah, take some other miscellaneous stuff.
Oh, all right. Give him a second. So on the trails piece, we had a great public meeting. I thought we had a great public meeting the other
Yes,
night at the Mount
That's
Hope
what I heard. Yep.
building. We shared with a lot of interested residents and abutters to the open space areas, what we hope to do with access roads, parking areas, things like that. There was some good exchange with several of the abutting folks that were interested in how this would impact their property. Just went into a lot of explanation as to how the town derived the work that we did, and I thought overall it was good. A lot of people have now some more interest in it. I think we're going to have some more folks be interested in participating, maybe some volunteers with some of the trails work. Folks have good legitimate concerns about the construction phase and how that will happen and what has to be cleared, and how it'll be taken care of in the future. So all those things I think were addressed. Also, the folks that were doing the trails piece were present and got into a good explanation of how they're moving forward. A lot of people were interested in the new maps we're going to have, that will be able to get folks out on that property and understand more about where they're going. So on both fronts, I think it was it was a good exchange, and we're gonna continue to move forward. So I was pretty happy without that. Anybody have any quick comments while we're,
No, I'm just anxious to go on to the next step and the next step, and hopefully we'll get them done very soon.
it's good.
Yep, all positive.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna open this. On August 6th, the Town Hall, the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40, Mass General Laws, and Section 30700, Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Town of Scituate to perform public water system improvements of well number 17A located in jurisdictional wetland area. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. So Dan's here for DPW this evening. Great. You can give them to Jen.
Janet.
Or
Thank you.
I'm Dan Smith with the Engineering Division. Just to refresh your memory,
Well,
about a year ago, we came forth with about the same project. And basically what we need to do is make a bypass on our existing transmission main that takes water from our well, 17A, which is out here. And there's a transmission main that runs cross-country to Tack Factory Pond, down Old Oaken Bucket, past the rotary, and it's put into the old Oaken Bucket Pond, so it can be used by the filtration plant. Currently, the water contains levels of iron and manganese that can't be used without treatment, so we can no longer pump it right into the distribution system like we did for years. And about 10, 12 years ago, the transmission main was constructed so that we could keep the well online. And basically, at this point, after the drought we had 2 years ago, we moved forward with this alternative. Well, this was what we thought was the preferred alternative, is basically just to run alongside the Herring Brook to a discharge point over here near Tack Factory. And actually, this commission approved it, but then
Yes.
it was denied by the DEP.
DEP.
And so we looked at a bunch, and we looked at every option we could think of to build this bypass, because we basically just want to get the water into Tack Factory Pond, which feeds the reservoir, which is a much larger storage impoundment than Old Oaken Bucket. Because after it leaves Old Oaken Bucket, it's lost to the system. It ends up in the ocean, basically. So we've abandoned this route after looking at it in detail. It's just, it's way more densely vegetated. And we came up with a new route, which I got a detailed plan up there, but basically it involves tapping into the existing transmission main here near the cranberry box on Old Oaken Bucket, and entirely staying on town property. We just come up around the condos that are there and down around this route and discharge into the pond above there. This is like 300-400 feet longer, but the route turned out to be much less impacts than the first one that we came up with. It's on the other plan. This time we did prepare a notice of intent. And we had it surveyed by Scituate, who did the wetland delineation and the land survey. And this is it. That was 100 scale. This is 40 scale. So,
Frank, it's there.
I put a legend up there because we do impact a lot of resource areas. And
Oh, yeah.
it's our water supply. So the red is the proposed main. I don't know if that's red, some kind of.
Sure.
The green is going down, and this is a wetland. And you can see there's 3 places where we're actually going to cross wetlands. The first one is just beyond the range of the condos right in here. And then the second is here where there's a basically, well, I noted it as a relic stream, and in this area, years ago, when the bog was active, there was a concern about pesticides getting down into the water supply. So a diversion structure was built here, and the water was channeled into a constructed channel that actually bypassed the spillway at Old Oaken Bucket Dam, so it doesn't mix with drinking water. So what's left in this river is pretty minimal flow. It's just what comes in from the tributary around it, which isn't like huge. And then the third place is, actually, we don't even get into wetlands here, but we'll kind of discharge when we get into buffer. So it's just two wetland crossings and what I call like a relic stream crossing. It does show up on the USGS maps as a stream. It still does today, but there's really not a lot of flow in it. Maybe a good rainstorm, but every time I've been out there, it's pretty much dry. So.
Never heard of a relic stream. I've heard of
made it up.
intermittent stream.
The flow was diverted. The diversion structure's there. It's working. Anything coming from the bog goes down that diversion channel that was man-made.
Right.
And around the time the dam was built,
So there is still occasional flow, so it could be more like an intermittent stream.
yeah, I mean, that's essentially, if it shows on the USGS, yeah, it's perennial, and it does show, but most of the flow is diverted. So we're basically at the point, we're almost at the point where it discharged into the pond before.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that's our new proposed route. It's essentially the same project as before. It does cross through areas like the water resource floodplain zone, which normally you won't be able to do anything, and also the water resources. But being a water project, it is exempt, and we're allowed to go in there as long as we're very careful. Which we will follow whatever conditions you guys have, but also in the zoning bylaws, there's a whole list of conditions that you need to take before you go in.
Right.
We plan on a 20-foot wide swath. It was picked out, it's been flagged in the field. We picked it based on the least amount of disturbance.
Yeah.
And it is all flagged. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it, but like I say, first thing we do is clear it, and put up silt fence, and we can get it approved before we started any work.
Yeah.
And basically at the end, we have a level spreader to spread it out, and then just make its way by gravity into the pond. So, and we will keep the option available by some valving on Old Oaken Bucket Road. We'll keep that option available in case we need to let it go on Bucket Pond instead. So, but this would be the preferred route for most of the time. This does qualify as a limited project under utilities, water improvements. And that does require that we look at alternatives, but you've already seen we've looked at one.
Mm-hmm.
And the town is also looking at the potential to build a filtration system at the well that will remove the iron and manganese. That's
Okay.
another option we're looking at. It's quite expensive, but this project is part of an even bigger project. It's gonna work together with the raising of the level of the
Level.
reservoir. So this will just help us to keep it full to feed the filtration plant. And also for fish passage and habitat flows in the stream. Because if we can get it here, then we can maintain the flows better. This fish ladder at the dam and at the fish ladder at Old Oaken Bucket.
Okay.
It's just going to give us a lot more flexibility. So, it's the other. Doing nothing really isn't an option. The town, as we saw in 2016, we can't get by with one of our sources offline. If any of our wells go out or the treatment facility goes
Yeah.
out, we're in trouble immediately, which is not allowed. So we're basically developing all of our sources, the wells and the surface water. And this bypass would be, another component of that.
Okay.
That's about it. I mean, we're gonna take every precaution we can during construction and make sure the contractor has a good spill containment kit, gets the silt fence in correctly, and in wetland areas, we'll try as best we can to construct it so that the soils go back in the same order, so that we don't get any unnatural stream flows underground.
Okay.
So, and that's the project, if you have any questions.
Yeah.
I
Penny?
think DEP will like this one better. Did you get any comments back from them?
We did. We got a SE number, and they told us that we also need to apply for water quality certification,
Okay,
which we're working on.
yeah, okay,
I think they will like this better. It is a notice of intent.
yeah,
Overall, the impact is way less than the original
Right.
submittal, because a lot of this isn't even in the buffer. There's that whole stretch over by that big house off of Route 3A.
right,
It's just upland, it's grass.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a huge field.
So it's 300 feet longer, but a lot of it is just upland,
Uh-huh,
free of all resources,
Okay.
so.
yeah.
So I think they will like it better. I don't know if they'll intervene.
Well,
have to
we'll
wait and
see.
Yeah, I hope not.
Doug?
That was my question, actually, the same one. But from the commission, do we have to require, like, details of every single crossing?
I was wondering if,
Plan details
if
of-
this was done by Horsley Wooden, did they give any restoration detail?
They only provided the survey. We put this together ourselves in-house. I don't know what kind of a detail you'd like to see. We hoping we could just open cut it and then put it back
Just the way it
Back
came
to the
out.
way it was.
the way
Yeah.
it was. It's kind of, it's real rocky. The stream bed is like all rocks. So putting it back to its original condition is probably going to be possible and have it be stable. I don't think horizontal augering is probably not an option because of all the rocks. We just would never get through.
So how do you plan to remove
Remove what?
the rocks?
We want to open cut it. We just want to trench it right through and
Yeah.
then we'll restore the stream bed.
Yeah, leave it.
So, yeah, I didn't see the need for a lot of detail there, and we're gonna be constructing this in-house with our own people, our own equipment, I think is the current plan. So we'll have a, good control over it, I'll probably be the one out there watching it, and I'm sure we'll stop by.
Oh, so we can go out
Oh,
with you?
yeah, I mean, you guys can always come out, but we'll be overseeing it, we'll do the procurements for the pipe and fittings and use the mostly highway guys to put it in. So, trying to keep it affordable,
Yeah,
so we had a certain budget, and it pretty much, that's the only way we're gonna get it done on budget is to use overtime, our own equipment.
Do you have an estimate for the duration of the construction project?
Hasn't been formally estimated out, but a couple of months. It's gonna take a few weeks just to clear the route.
yeah,
A lot of the length of it is just trees that have fallen down. So we need to cut sections of the fallen trees out of the way. A lot of it's gonna be just clearing the path. There's some big trees right in the way, particularly just before the relic stream up in that hill area. And I would say that's gonna be a good month alone, and probably another month to get the pipe in. So maybe 2 months, 2 to 3 months. And that depends on what emergencies come up as well.
because the town is doing it.
Yeah, and there's other options. We may end up hiring a contractor to help our guys, or our guys to help them, things like that. And it may go quicker that way because when there's a break or something, our guys have to run and take care of that. But
Sure.
the contractor can stay on and finish. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we would plan on getting in and out of there as quick as we could.
Okay. Lisa? Jen?
Nope.
Yeah,
Just a quick question. Did I hear you say that the water's gonna come down to Old Bucket Road, and you're gonna tie it into the stream that goes into the diversionary structure?
No.
Actually, Paul, if you want to move forward to see it, there,
Okay, that's fine.
Um,
Oh, no, that's
it's
fine.
actually, the tap on the main is before that brook and the diversionary structure. So this is going to essentially cut that water off before that. Their old plan started right at the well, and it went to the, more of the rear of Tack Factory. This one is along Old Oaken Bucket, but before that brook crossing. And it'll go off through the woods and then into the reservoir, but closer to 3A.
Solid pipe all the way to it, till it discharges by the pond.
Yes, sir.
I live in a condo.
And actually, if your name,
Mike Walsh. Yeah, I'm just curious, so you're gonna go through the woods. I mean, how wide is it gonna be? And, you know, you mentioned 20 feet. So you're gonna basically go through a lot of tree roots and things. I mean,
We
how
have-
much damage, do you
I-
anticipate any
I've
damage?
been out there a bunch of times now, I don't think we'll be cutting any trees.
Okay,
And there's plenty of room between the dead ones and fallen ones. And that's the intent, is we're not gonna try to run a straight line, we're gonna run the line of least resistance.
big around, okay.
Right. Like I say, there's so many trees. A big part of this job is just clearing the 20-foot swath of trees that are already down and rolling those out of the way.
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Heather Harriman, you mentioned.
And Heather, your address, or?
164, I'm also in the condos there. You mentioned rolling the trees, will you be taking them out?
No, it's in the write-up. I think what we're planning on doing is to cutting them into manageable sizes, rolling them out of the way. And while
Not
the
taking
construction's
them
going
off.
on, then just rolling them back as we back out. And
So these are trees that are already down, Dan?
yes.
Why wouldn't you take them out? Why wouldn't you take them out?
Well, they have to move so that we can get our equipment in there.
I
Oh, you asking
understand.
why we wouldn't
Why
take
wouldn't
them?
you take them out if they're in the way? You're just gonna roll them over?
But typically, on jobs like this, I think conservation just wants it left the way
But-
it was to the
Like
extent
already
possible.
disturbed?
But, yeah, that's in the write-up on the plans, that basically the plan is, once we're okay and everything's, the grass is growing and it's stabilized, and as we're pulling out the silt fence, we would just roll those pieces back over the line. And just let it stay.
Mother Nature kind of likes having things, you know, down and stuff, and just leave it wild.
Well, one at a time.
Yeah,
We don't want to create a path,
no.
we basically don't want to. Basically, we want to hide this.
Have you seen the plan or the path that this is taken? Okay.
Can you also speak for clarity, the significance of this relic stream that you're referencing? And a
Well,
little
the
bit about
stream-
how
the
that's going to
stream-
impact or?
Yeah, the stream used to feed the pond, which is our water supply,
Yes.
and it was, pesticides and fertilizers from the bog. So a diversion structure was built about the same time as the
So it would stop flowing.
and a channel was created and
Well,
basically
pesticides.
diverted all that contaminated water around our water supplies.
You know it does flow.
Yes, oh yeah, I mean, that part of it does.
It
But
sure
I'm saying
does.
downstream of the diversion, it's pretty dry most of the time. I think if you're out there now, it'll be dry.
Right now.
Yes.
So it would-
The times I've been up, it's,
But even if it does flow, so what?
But that's not going to be blocked or changed. That's
No.
going to
no, it
continue.
won't be
We'll
changed,
just,
it'll stay open.
it'll stay the way it is. Whatever.
Yes, sir.
I noticed, you know, you have the markers there that, I think, well, how close you can be to the property, I guess, no closer than 10 feet or 20 feet to the
Oh,
property?
to your property line?
Yeah.
No more than 15, 20 feet.
15, okay, so,
Or no less than 20.
okay, so pretty much what you marked out last fall is
Yeah.
is what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the width, that your clearance about the width of this room?
About 20 feet, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It'll grow back in quick.
Anybody else in? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, when
Huh?
did you say
I
you
want good
started?
water to drink.
Yeah,
That's unknown right now because we need
More
one more
important than
permit now to
anything.
get it. DEP did say they need a water quality permit, which can take a
Yeah.
few months. So we'll have to wait on that.
Dan, a few questions. So it would be good to have some wetlands replication plan, even minimal. You know, I think we would ask for that on any of them. I think you'd make a sketch, some plantings or something, if you can give us some sort of replication for those wetlands areas would be good. You mentioned going before zoning. So do you have to treat that intermittent stream as a tributary?
Oh, we don't need to go before zoning or building. We're exempt. These projects are exempt. It's just. by
So
right.
even though that stream is a tributary, I mean, we don't have jurisdiction over these, it's a zoning piece.
Yes.
But,
building and zoning,
but
yeah.
because it's a water project,
Yeah, a lot of the regulations don't, they apply mainly for someone trying to come in and put in a residential, industrial, or whatever. It's, for water projects, we're exempt.
I was just surprised at how much these tributaries trigger different pieces, and it is a zoning
Right.
board issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, I brought it over and discussed it with Bob, and
okay.
he felt we didn't need to apply.
When you do the wetlands replication, can you, maybe it's in this and I just can't see it in the print, like pipe size, pipe depth, is there a detail showing any of
Oh,
that?
yeah, I didn't, the details are on there, on the submittal.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be 4 feet minimum.
So you're gonna
Yeah.
bury it to 4
Oh,
feet, so they're gonna
oh,
keep
yeah.
this going year round.
Mm-hmm,
And what's the size of the pipe?
8-inch.
Okay. And the discharge at the level spreader, you feel that that's adequate, so that's not gonna erode anything going into the pond?
Oh, yeah.
You're
Yeah.
pretty comfortable
Yeah,
with where that's?
There'll be a level spreader that will prevent, I forget what the dimensions are, but big enough to spread it out so that.
I mean, an 8-inch pipe, that's a good flow of water.
Yeah, yeah. I think that will be good. We use some riprap and big enough where it's not causing any damage. We will be putting a foot valve at the end so that when it shuts off, it will drain into the ground and not freeze.
Okay. I can't think of anything else. I think just getting that other information would be helpful.
Sure.
All right. Anybody else? Do we want to close on this, or do we want to wait till you get your input from DEP? I mean, if we close, then essentially we're done. If you get some feedback that they want you to make some additional changes or modifications, then we'd either have to look at it as an amendment or have to redo the hearing.
No, I guess I'd prefer to close tonight. I can get you details. I have some descriptive restoration on the write-up.
Right.
I actually wasn't planning on any plantings. Possibly some things could be salvaged as we're clearing and could.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be disturbing wetlands, we need to know what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
And-
well, we could make a.
And there may be some vegetation or something that needs to be restored.
Yeah, I could work with maybe Amy and decide what kinds of plants and, I mean, actually, in the actual wetlands, I don't think you want to plant anything. I think you just want that to come back naturally, but in the buffer areas, sure.
Okay. Well, I think it's important for us to get that.
Okay.
I'd encourage you to continue this, to just get that input from DEP and get us that information. I just think if they come back and give you something fairly significant that they want to see changed, then we'd have to decide if that's an amendable piece or whether you'd wind up having to have another hearing, which,
Yeah, well, it's my understanding though, if they're gonna intervene, they'd wait till you make a decision and close the hearing, and then they would have their 10 days to appeal.
Like they did the last time.
Yeah, they waited till the 10th day of the 10-day appeal period.
Right, so DEP did not have technical comments on the project at this point.
okay.
So, I mean, it is a limited project with significant public benefit, a utility project. So, I mean, I think it definitely is permittable. I do agree that there are certain things that are lacking, like you say, perhaps possibly more information about the BMP plan. But anyways, I think that those could be conditioned.
Yep,
And really, it's pending the 401 water quality cert.
okay. So it's either gonna get approved or denied as opposed to be anything
Yeah.
significant changed. That's fine. we'll get those pieces. We can close and, we'll get those parts from you before we condition it.
Okay.
Frank?
Okay, so,
I just wanted to add, maybe in that condition, since there's a possibility it could go out to subcontract, that if there's something in there about a construction sequence, so there's something about, my only concern would be a long open trench and then there's a rain event that would affect these abutters that are over here, that,
Right.
you know, so they don't get washed out with silt or something like that. So, if you're doing it, you're probably cutting, placing, and burying as you go. So you would want to spell that out in case you let that to a subcontractor, that they
Right, yeah.
have
We're
to
looking at-
follow
yeah,
that sequence.
We've looked at a bunch of options, kind of preliminary, to figure out how we can stay within budget. And actually, one thing we thought of is like, we'll do the clearing and the erosion control ourselves, and then maybe have some with the piping. Or, you know, maybe even have our crews do the easier sections and sub out the more difficult sections. And, you know, we just gotta try to live within the budget, and we're thinking of all different options. But, it's probably,
Yeah, just
we're gonna have some assistance from a contractor, but we'll be there supervising you one way or the other.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have that just as, you know,
Yeah.
part of the order of conditions. that
Yeah,
there's
and I think that's
a-
Doug's point is well made, especially you're in an intermittent stream, and then you have, you know, you guys don't get on this right away, and then we're into a wetter season. That could do some real damage
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
to that wetlands area. And I know it's a town project, it's taxpayer money, it's all that sort of thing, but the town still needs to do the same
Oh, sure.
piece that any other, we just had a hearing last hearing for a change in a sewer line on the, right off the driftway. And we want to make sure that the Herringbrook's protected. And we asked for a whole number of things with that, including this same sort of thing. Give us some guarantees that those pieces aren't going to be disturbed. So I think that's important, that all be part of that same,
Oh, yeah.
all
Well,
right?
the plan set definitely has sufficient detail, you know, in laying out the project. But I think the BMPs, you know, definitely laying out time of year, you know, like work, like how you're gonna trench and go. I know you've explained that to me, so it's clear to me, but I agree if the contractor were to take this over, we wanna make sure that
Sure.
it's solid with them too.
But I don't see much for restoration in those wetland areas, and I think that needs to be part of it. I mean, you're gonna dig a 4-foot trench, you're gonna have spoils, they gotta go back, there's an area that's disturbed. You know, we know that most of it will revegetate and it'll be fine, but I think we need to have that as part of the plan. Okay?
So do we want to close this?
Yep.
I make a motion to close.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Believe me, it will.
So far, we're doing pretty good this summer with water. I think the reservoir's dropping, but certainly not nearly as bad.
So far, we're doing good.
Okay. Bronstein, 182 Central Ave.
Should you go back up to 630, to 94 Central Ave?
Where?
No, he's back right here.
Where are you going? Oh, 182.
We've continued the
I'm
first
sorry.
two.
Yeah,
right?
no, you're right,
Didn't
you're
they
right.
continue
I
last
missed
time?
it.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is a continued hearing.
Yeah.
All right.
You're ready to go? Yep.
Just to recap, the last time.
Pull another chair around if, I don't know if Bob's
Oh, yeah.
coming up.
Actually,
Yeah, we're going back what we want.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, you want me to get it for that?
everyone?
Just for the record, why don't you?
Oh, yeah. Rick Bronstein, 182 Central Avenue. So just wanted to do a quick recap of where we are and what we're trying to provide. We met about a month ago and presented what we want to do, and I assume you all have the information of what we're trying to do, adding rocks to the existing rocks at 182 Central Avenue. And I think after our first meeting, what was said is you wanted to quantify, the amounts and the sizes and so forth. So then we came back a couple of weeks ago, and Bob had put together a plan to quantify the size of the rocks we were going to add, the dimensions, the heights, and so forth. And I had distributed some pictures for what the abutting houses had and what we're trying to emulate. So I think everybody was somewhat clear on that. And then at that point, I think the idea was we weren't really clear on what the optimal amount was to do protection of property the way we'd like to do and rebuild, but not overly do it so it's going to be a major impact. So we'd be in compliance with any Mass State regs, which we aren't experts on. So at this point, what I've done is engaged a senior coastal geologist, Stan Humphreys, who has hopefully a lot of experience in this background, to look at the plan we want to do and then present to you his thoughts about what the impact would be or the advisability of this, and to answer any questions you have. So at this point, I guess, does everybody have the original plan that we were trying to, I'm assuming you
We're
you
familiar
have
with
that?
it, sure.
Okay, good. In that case, Stan, why don't you pick up on that?
Good evening. Stan Humphreys with LEC. I did submit through LEC a letter July 30th going through a general site description, the resource area descriptions, performance standards, both state and local, and concluded with my summary. Let me first of all express my sympathy, empathy for you folks up front and the job that you're doing to protect Hummerock. There are a lot of activities going on over there. It's a very developed barrier beach. I don't need to tell you that. But when I came to live in Scituate after the '78 blizzard, first out of graduate school, I said, boy, this is a coastal geologist's dream to live in Scituate with all these cliffs and all these barrier beaches. So I thought. It wasn't a nightmare. It hasn't been a nightmare, but it certainly has been work. I was in your seat for 10 years, from '82 to '92, and I've seen the redevelopment of Hummerock from the '78 blizzard and the '92 storm influence the reconstruction of houses and foundations. Everything is getting there to be on piles, allowing overwash to occur. But then driveways and septic systems have intermittently become protective, and there's these obstructions that have been either permitted or otherwise constructed. And looking at the accumulation of boulders that's occurred, to me has reduced overwash. It hasn't completely obstructed it from occurring, and that's plaguing both the property, private property, and public property, specifically Central Avenue. And that's led to a pretty sizable project to elevate Central Avenue and create cobble dune. I submitted an aerial photo with the letter where I focused primarily on I think what's phase 3 of the town's cobble dune project, just to highlight the fact that out of 25 homes, 21 of them have boulders that are pretty visible, pretty obvious on any kind of aerial photograph, and I think Rick has some ground shots. In looking a little closer about the shoreline erosion or change data from coastal zone, it's amazing that this barrier beach is moving at about 3 inches a year since the late 1800s. So when we talk about barrier beach migration, back in college when I was there, and continues pretty much, with sea level rise, barrier beaches are theoretically to move landward and upward and be conserved over time with their form and volume. But I think what we're seeing at Hummerock is that it's not increasing vertically. It's increasing laterally, horizontally, with all of the overwash events. And it's obvious that the town's taking steps to try and elevate the front side or the primary frontal dune area with this new cobble dune. That's why there is a change on the new plans where Bob superimposed the design of that cobble dune that the state's going to go, the town may go forward with, just to demonstrate the fact that the proposed boulder area to elevate from, I think, 2 to 3 feet, from 15 to 17 feet, is not going to go any higher. It's going to be lower than the top crest of that proposed dune by Applied Coastal. It creates more of, or sustains more of a high point along the barrier it has for these 20 other homes, which gives, or let's say sustains some sort of an elevation that essentially is going to become a core to this cobble dune that we can expect to come forward. At that point, it becomes buried. A lot of these boulders have been buried already. They move with the power of the ocean. Many people reflect on the 10-ton boulder that was moved off of Plymouth Beach into Bert's restaurant. These aren't even of that size or that caliber. So I'm seeing where an argument can be made that this swath of boulders is really sustaining a dune form. Overwash is continuing to occur, so it's not obstructing the lateral movement of the dune. And maybe more importantly, most importantly, it's not a coastal engineering structure like a revetment, where it's been designed to have filter fabric, bedding stone, armor stone that's been positioned so that it's fixed in one place. Therefore, there's very little, or there's no equivalent to wave reflection and loss of beach in front of what we typically see occurring at coastal engineering structures. It certainly has happened all over town where the vertical concrete seawalls are being undermined and they're having to be reinforced with boulders at their toe. So I'm going to let Rick go back to the project and answer your questions. I will say I suspect CZM and DEP will object to the project because they don't live here. They don't really work with the problems of overwash, the problems that individuals have, where to put the material, how to get material, where best to put it, should we leave it here? But they're, I think, trying to add advice to that. But from my perspective, I think that given the existing conditions at this site, where there's demonstrated proof of existing boulders, there's high suspicion that there are more boulders beneath what's visible because of it dropping essentially in the barrier beach, that that the project is reasonable and I think complies with performance standards.
So just to conclude on, or just to give an
Thank you.
overview on this, is, you know, at this point, I think we've agreed there's already a lot of rocks here. I provided you the pictures. About 26 are visible now, and that's already been buried by all the cobble that was brought over from the driveway. So as you had mentioned, it's reasonable to assume that's been there many, many years. It hasn't grown, it's shrunk. And I think we said the last time we were here that DEP didn't have any comments and that it would be permissible to dig it all up and rebuild it all if we wanted to gain that additional 2 feet. But it seems in that sense it's probably not going to be very secure for longevity. So what we're trying to do is just add about 30 rocks, which is maybe about 30% of what we're assuming is going to be there, to get back to where we're going to be. So it seems to me that in either case, you're going to have, and again, the purpose of this is we have a 10-inch concrete wall that's supporting an entire deck. That's there. So when we talk about overwash and what's happening through this, we already have rocks, we already have that wall, and then I'm not sure why it would matter if I dug up the whole rocks I have now, just to work with what I have to get the elevation, but not the width, versus adding another layer to make it sustainable. Either way, you got that wall, you got that deck, we're trying to protect it, not to mention we want to protect the septic as well. So it seems to me that what we're trying to do is a reasonable course. It's not starting some new project, that's not making something huge. I think that, you know, Stan has gone through this and itemized each of these potential articles that we're going to impact, that it seems to be in compliance with the scope of what they're trying to do here. And in that regard, seems like it's a viable project. The other thing is, I think he's pointed out, and I think I provided pictures, but if you'd like, I've got some more, that when I walk up that beach, literally 80% of the houses north of me have just huge boulder rocks. And again, if with all of that occurring over the years,
Sure.
we've had minimal landward movement of that beach, it seems reasonable to say, by me adding another 2 feet of rock, is not going to really make any environmental impact, especially whereas I have a concrete wall behind it that's there either way.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you if you could approve this project. You know, we've tried to provide all the information that you've asked for, and I've engaged engineers to do so. And as you know, just as a homeowner, as a consumer, as a person who lives in the town, I'm not a company. You know, I don't want to spend $100,000 to prove something that should be okay to do. It seems that this is just a reasonable project that's not going to have any impact at this point. So I'd like to ask if you could go along with this, or if you have any questions, maybe we can
Yeah,
answer
we'll
them.
go through the commission.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Penny, do you have anything else you want to add or ask about
Well,
this?
I sympathize with you.
Thank you.
It's a terrible spot, but I just, like
Wonderful spot.
Stan said, DEP and CZM, they're not going along with this, bringing in more rocks. Bring in compatible material, reposition these rocks. I mean, I'm like we're in a quandary. I sympathize, I hear, I would want to protect my home too. But
Penny, can I just
I
make
don't
a
know.
comment to that?
Let's just go through the commission.
Oh, okay,
Please.
I just was trying to address, but, okay, we'll go through them all.
Thanks for the report, because we had asked last time that you were here to do something like this, and it certainly answered my questions, and I think, look, I'm looking for this from a practical point of view. You're trying to protect your home. And I look at this map, this aerial, which is helpful, and I pulled it up myself too before you brought that in there. But I'm looking down here and you're just seeing stones everywhere except for a few places where those stones are either missing where they once were buried or whatever, or perhaps they weren't in there. I actually think this is a practical approach to it.
Thank you.
And you're not making a statement in your report that this is going to guarantee to save his home in a major storm event, and I think we can all accept the fact that we're literally doing our best to stem the tide. I have no idea what it's going to look, Hummerock's going to look like in 20 years from now, and certainly 30 years from now. But I appreciate that you need to do what you can to protect your home. I think Hummerock's built. It might be a barrier beach, technically, but it's full of homes, and those homes have been building and rebuilding and throughout all the years that I've been living here in Massachusetts. So I actually think that you do have a reasonable project. I don't know what that means with DEP, but from my perspective, I think it's
Well, they made no comment, is what my understanding was. last
no
time we
technical
were-
comment, but they did ask for other types of mitigation, but that's my input. But I appreciate the report, and I want to thank you for doing that, as you were.
Thanks, Ted. Lisa?
I do empathize with you. And I agree with actually a lot lot of points that Doug made as well as Penny made. I think what we're looking at is, it is a barrier beach by definition, but it's a highly developed barrier beach, and the state has never come up with a definition of highly developed barrier beach. This beach, because it's so highly developed, does not function as a barrier beach. It's never going to, as long as there's riprap, seawalls, and houses on it. And so we have property owners that have built homes that have not built homes, being told that they can't protect them. Most of them were there prior to the Wetlands Protection Act. And there are probably 95% of the homes that have riprap that is exposed above as well as riprap that is below. And I think that riprap is certainly a better alternative to a solid structure as a seawall. I think realigning the existing riprap is just gonna cause more disturbance, and it's, as the winters and the waves come in, it's just gonna sink again, whereas at least you have the riprap that's below the ground now, in a pretty solid position. Adding a couple of feet to it, probably lends to less disturbance, and it is a benefit because the streets aren't gonna flood as easily in Central. It does some protection subjects because there's nothing, I can't think of anything that would be more toxic to the water and the beach and the environment than raw sewage. So I see this as a logical choice.
Okay. Jen?
Maybe I missed a couple things, but are you suggesting digging up what's there and she's suggesting not, or are you suggesting not?
I think what I was referring to is it's permissible if I just want to work with the 30, 40, or 100 stones that are there, dig them all up and go down 10 feet and reposition them. That would be permissible because there's not new stones. And so the alternate is to say bring in additional stones to bring up that 2 feet. And so my option.
The 30% that you.
I can just count 26 stones visible, and that's after they've filled in the beach with the rubble. So, you got to assume after many, many years, there's a lot more than just what's on the surface. My estimate is there's got to be at least 2 or 3 times. So the thought was, it's reasonable to bring in one layer of stone, or the stones on top, onto a foundation, as opposed to undermine the whole thing and try to rebuild it from what was there.
I'm not sure, but yeah.
About which?
That you can just dig it up even if it's already there.
I don't think so.
Right?
Well, it's a disturbance.
Yeah, then you really.
It's all part of the process. I think that's what we're debating in general is what do we think is going to be allowed, or what could be allowed in it.
So is the question, and
Can I just, let me just,
go.
Amy, why don't you?
Well, I mean, I'm not so sure I have much additional to say. We've talked about function, form, material types being consistent. So I mean, we've been encouraging nourishment in this location all along. It's just, it comes down to what material is chosen to put on top of what's already there.
Right.
And so, for instance, Stan brought up the new cobble dune that's being proposed along the entire stretch of Hummerock, and that is indeed actually proposed to be constructed out of cobble, not large stone and boulders. So that would be one point. Otherwise, I mean, I think I've already commented is the opinion of whether it's permittable in accordance with regs. It doesn't appear that it would be consistent or meet the performance standards for barrier beach or coastal dune.
That a cobble.
Cobble would.
Right.
Or could.
Bring in all of
But as proposed, I mean, I think it's tough. It's a tough decision because I hear everything that all of you are saying, and I agree. It's a developed barrier beach. There's no easy answer. I'm not sure what will happen. I think the last meeting, Frank made some good points about the fact the town as a whole does rely on the different permitting agencies to support the entire town in our endeavors to seek grants and get funding and stuff like that, so, I'm not so sure we want to be cowboys on this project. Perhaps we should seek comment from the agencies, specifically CZM, not so much DEP, because I'm not so sure we get anything back from them.
Right.
Or perhaps put it over to them to make the ultimate decision, or, I don't know, approve it, ask for different material. I mean, there's lots of ways you could go, but really it's your decision, so.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak to this? Yes, sir.
Just one comment.
And your name? Your-
Bob Grace, 180 Central Avenue. When we talk about cobble, the cobble that they're proposing, it's huge, nowhere near the area that Mr. Bronstein wants to fill up. In other words, if Mr. Bronstein were to try to put cobble there, it would act like a shotgun, because it would just throw those stones right at his house. The cobble dune, when we talk about a cobble dune, it's because it's gigantic. It's like 30 feet wide at the top.
It's a very contiguous piece that's going to run down the whole way.
Big. So that they have to, if you're going to make it out of cobble, you have to make it that big.
Right.
It wouldn't work, I don't think, where Mr. Bronstein is, because of the limited area to pile cobble there.
Sure.
Would be detrimental to a wave hitting that. It's just going to drive it against the house.
Right.
My only thought.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Tom Charbonneau, 178 Central, and as you know, we have NOIs in front of the commission here that we put on hold for some time because we've been seeking, the best things that we can get. So we have retained Mr. Humphreys as to bring some professional input into this debate, because it seems like there are various ways that the commission could go. So we're really seeking some direction, and hope that by considering Mr. Bronstein's project in a favorable way, we could then shed some better light on what Mr. Gracie and I are trying to do.
Sure.
at 178.
Thank you. So, just before you, I'm going to try to summarize some things and maybe get a few questions. First, as Doug's already said, I appreciate your engaging Stan. I know Bob does a great job with surveying this piece and all that, but Stan's expertise, I've worked with Stan on projects. He's presented a number of things here. He served on the commission. He appreciates the conflict that goes back and forth here, and I think it's good to have somebody with that knowledge, as well as can take a look at this project and say, here's the pitfalls, here's the possible help that you could get. So I think none of us are far off on where we want to be with this. One of the pieces that is important is that this is somewhat of a precedent setter, and as you point out, you're right next door, ready to move forward, and you'd like to see where this goes. And I think when the commission makes a decision to do something like that, you're going to be looking at it. I think also DEP is going to be looking at it and saying, how is this going to impact what we're trying to do here? I think altered resource is the technical definition for something in Humrock. It was a barrier beach at one point, but with all, so everybody points out, with the walls and the changes and the septics and all that, it doesn't function the way that these textbook barrier beaches would do. So how do we deal with that, and at the same time have folks deal with this? The second piece that's important to me is that there's an awful lot of folks that have not requested permission to do this, that there's work up and down there. Amy and I drove up and down Central Ave shortly after the storm, and people were placing material without permission, and it's pretty obvious to see what's a new stone and what's one that's been bashed around for a number of years. And the fact that you're here and saying, we want to do this, we want to permit it, we want to do it right, is critical to the commission and how we go through our process. So I appreciate that, and I understand your predicament, and I'm also looking at your costs. This costs more money, this costs more money. So at the same thing that I mentioned at the last meeting, Stan, you weren't here, the predicament that the town has, we're also trying to dance with the upper agencies. We have to deal with DEP, and we have to work with CZM. Situate's part of the community rating service. All these sort of things sort of tie together, that the town is proactive and working to hopefully better the situation. And we don't all agree with some of these. After this last storm Riley, I was more than frustrated at one meeting with some of the logic that was presented to the commission from various committees. I'm like, this makes no sense. We could get this all cleaned up. We could do a better job protecting our customers. But I thought that before. I mean, after the blizzard of '78, I rebuilt some homes for people, and the rule at the time was if there was any part of a wall or any part of a structure standing, we could rebuild that for our customer. And we built them some great concrete walls in front of their houses, thinking, well, that'll fix it. And those houses don't even exist anymore. So there's a lot more to this than this little piece that's here. But your part for now is trying to protect your home and that of your neighbors, and we get it. And I think both Doug and Jen, does it really make a lot of sense to dislodge material that's already embedded in the sand, or can somehow this be fortified a little bit? And I'm still at a quandary as to how we condition this in a way that we help you and we work with agencies that oversee us. And I think I used the analogy last time of the building code. I mean, I'm oftentimes trying to build something for a customer. We're told we have to insulate these houses in some super fashion. I look at it and think, this is going to make this house rot in 20 years. How do I build this for a customer that I can live with myself and at the same time, get a building permit or get a certificate so that my customer can live there. So we're still batting that one around. I'm not sure that I'm not sure how far we would get in getting, as you point out, any additional input from DEP. I mean, I'd certainly be open to saying to...
Frank, I guess one question I have is the revolving theme thus far for me. And again, I'm new, and I appreciate you put your time, and you're working at night, and trust me, I appreciate it. But the one thing I don't, help me with is you're in a position to enforce something of which we really don't know what is okay to do. So it's you can do it or you can't do it, but we really don't know what that okay or not okay is, because there's really no clear delineation of what's okay.
Right.
And I think as we went through this, we're like, well, let's get closer to see what would be okay and what wouldn't be okay.
Right.
And so I think they went to the DEP. DEP came back with no real significant comment on this, but saying, well, you can rearrange what you have, but we're not sure what else, And we're not asking some significant thing.
Yeah.
This isn't like we're creating something from no point at all. And then as we've gone through, we're looking for evidence to say we're somewhat in compliance with what they want. And so I think hopefully you'll agree, we have somebody who's said, geez, this is by all standards in compliance with what DEP does. So if it's approved, and again, this isn't like we're going to say we're just building a seawall here. This is, you got to say, and anybody, it's a defensible position to say, well, the intent is to block water not bouncing backwards.
Right.
Well, I got a 10-inch wall there. That's going to be there till it gets washed away.
Right.
And then you got these rocks, and they're probably going to stay and work for not many years, but I want to be cautious.
So I must have missed something in your plan, but when we talked, one of the things I did ask was to tell us roughly how much more stone in terms of tons of stone that you want to add.
You put that,
I think
And I can't remember, I might have missed it.
that was in the report.
Previous submission, I've got about 160 plus or minus tons.
You want to add.
Yeah, and the rationale there is essentially approximately 30 stones, and they're about 5 tons, give or take, I don't know the exacts, to elevate that by that amount. I mean, it could be plus or minus.
Got it.
But I guess the point of what I'm saying is that if this gets submitted to DEP and there's some outrage, they're gonna come back and say no. But it seems to me if they come back and say, well, geez, you've approved this, what's the rationale?
Right.
You could say, well, you know, he's got a cement wall, he's already got rocks there, we're adding 2 feet to protect the property. We've had a coastal engineer, a regular engineer, give supporting estimate or, information. It just seems to me that my thought was give you the ammunition you need to feel comfortable that you're not a rogue board
Sure, but then-
doing something against, DEP.
Maybe I'm overthinking this too much, but I'm also considering your neighbors with this. I mean,
It
so
can, but
just-
every
just-
situation is isolated. I mean, it's
I
independent.
understand, but you've got a situation that's already existing. You're gonna make it larger. So you're gonna additionally fortify your
Gonna bring
wall.
it back to its original
I understand.
condition. I mean, that's,
So now,
restore.
when we have these next 2 hearings, we're gonna have to think about so can they add what you're being able to add, or should they be able to build a wall and I know that's not your
I
problem.
understand your scenario, but you know what, this is an independent application.
I
It's gotta be
understand,
viewed as
I
an
understand,
independent-
but.
Yeah, I mean, but I know what you're
But
saying.
we're trying
I don't have that
to
answer.
have some sort of
But
consistency.
it's hard
and-
to say you can't because I don't know the future of
Yeah.
something else.
No, I know, and I think along the way, some of the work that was done there may be detrimental to other people. When we move further down the beach, more to the north, when people were tearing down their houses, they were asked to remove any sort of protection or fortification, and now we know that that's opened up those areas to some
Yep.
real problems, because now you have these individual openings between areas that are fortified.
That's right. I mean, that's why it's
All
just,
or nothing.
It's a nightmare.
It's all or
well,
nothing.
it is, but it's not. If we can provide you with the evidence to support a rational decision, and again, even if I didn't have a cement wall, a 10-inch cement wall for the full width, whatever happens, water's gonna hit that and bounce off either way.
Right.
So this isn't, what more damage could rocks going 2 feet higher possibly create than what I already have with a 10-foot wall?
Stan, can I ask you a question? If you were coming in with a design to put fortification on the toe of that wall's there. So now you're gonna say, all right, I wanna protect this, and oftentimes that's done today. People are putting some sort of stone, revetment or whatever in front of these walls. Is this what would get placed there? What you're proposing, would that be something that was?
I think it's reasonable to see that materials of a lesser grain size between the boulders and the wall are acting more like a cushion. I think I've looked at some of the repairs that have been done with additional boulders at the toe of the concrete walls. And that's just additional force that's being exerted on that concrete. It may fill a gap below the concrete, but I'm not so sure it does any. They'll move. That's abrading the concrete. He didn't design it this way, I don't think.
Well,
It
no,
was built that way.
Just as an interesting point, originally, there was a house on a foundation, it was built, it actually went all the way to federal court years ago, and then back and forth, and because of a design change, they rolled the house out, put the roll back in, and then they took out the original foundation, but this foundation had already been poured for the deck. So this isn't a retaining wall for a home, for water. It was built really as a foundation for a deck.
Right.
And then the rocks were put in front of it. And so that's why, to me, it's somewhat instrumental, because if we have a big breach on this, it's gonna be, $100,000 on a deck, of which serves nobody.
Right.
And that's why I continue to say, what's reasonable, that's not gonna cause impact on the environment, that's defensible through DEP or CMZ on any reasonable parameter.
Sure.
Yeah, the
And I know
waves
you're
are
on
gonna
the
be
spot.
breaking on the boulders seaward of the
Right.
deck. If they were under the deck against the concrete wall, I think there'd be a lot of upward thrusts of waves breaking on them.
And the good news is I can attest we have had no damage in that house for 23 years since it was built, or rebuilt, because we had it before there, and there was So, it's worked so far that my father was here. At 98, he'd say you can't worry about the future. It's Humrock's an enigma that has just stayed there as long as it has in the first place.
All right, well, I'm going to entertain a motion, if someone would like to make one. What do you want to close?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
Second?
Are we closing it?
You can either close it, or you can deny it.
No, you just close it, meaning you're not accepting
Any more
material,
information,
And then at the next meeting,
we'll,
you can either
we'll
accept
condition it or deny it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have them
We don't need
deliver
any
any
more
more
information.
information.
Yep.
So
All right,
I
so take a motion to close.
I'm so moved.
Second, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your additional input.
You didn't take a vote.
What did you say?
Motion to close, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
What exactly does that mean?
It's closed.
That means it goes into a black box and you can wait till see the smoke come out of the chimney. Stan will tell you.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate your time, and I know you're in, rock and a hard place. So hopefully
Literally.
we provided some, I know. I just complimented.
Perfetti, 294 Central Ave, raise and rebuild, on August 6, 2018, at 6:45 PM in the Town Hall. Situate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40, Massachusetts General Laws, and Section 30700, Town of Situate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Mark and Karen Perfetti to raise and reconstruct a dwelling on property located at 294 Central Ave, Humrock. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Gregory Morse. I'm a registered engineer with Morse Engineering, representing the property owner and applicant, Mark and Karen Perfetti. As just read into the record, this is a notice of intent to allow the raising and reconstruction of a single-family home at 294 Central Avenue out in Humrock. The property, if I refer you to the plan, is shown in black line representing the property line. Central Ave is at the bottom of the page. The Atlantic Ocean and Humrock Beach is at the top of the page. The property extends out to the mean low water mark. The property is already developed with a home located right here. What we're proposing to do, that home was damaged this past winter. We're proposing to take down that home and construct a new home, generally within the same location on the lot. The entire lot is considered barrier beach. The property is also velocity zone with respect to floodplain. The velocity zone elevation is at 15. The new house, as you'll see, is actually smaller in size, footprint-wise, than the existing house. We included with our NOI a layout of the pilings. This would be elevated on open wood pilings up to the first floor elevation at 22, above the 15 velocity elevation. DEP had no comments. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
So the foundation is going,
Correct.
except the patio
The
foundation.
patio stays out back.
That's staying. And I don't know why, but I don't have any piling.
It was included in as
It's in
as a
there.
page, Appendix C.
That's right, it's
Yeah.
the small, yes, I do understand it now. All right, so you're making it a little smaller, you're getting rid of the foundation, putting it on pilings, and leaving the deck. Okay, done. I
You-
just need to understand.
The plan shows a 7.7% increase in gross floor area.
Yeah, that's the gross floor area, which includes your first floor plus your second floor.
Oh,
The
okay.
pictures, the existing second floor right now is only really a half floor.
Yeah,
So,
it's gonna be a full floor.
correct.
Okay, the note says to reinforce by boulder, since we just had a boulder discussion. What exactly
Yeah, there's a concrete wall along the back line right here.
Yeah.
Which that concrete holds up the patio in the back.
Yeah, and you put
We were gonna
boulders up
place
against it.
boulders against that wall. Correct.
I was always curious about those too when I see them, if it,
Not on
it-
the seaward
it's-
side, though.
No, on
No,
on the road side, just to reinforce that wall as
yeah,
opposed
okay.
to taking out the wall and compromising it.
okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, no other question.
Lisa?
I think it's a wonderful improvement, you know, to the property and to elevate it and do exactly what you're doing is exactly proper.
There you go. Jen?
I'm good.
Amy?
I agree, it's, you know, we definitely are promoting, elevating the houses in this area. One thing I was looking for was the stamped structural drawings that we usually see for elevations.
Where it's just this little,
So we just usually detail
those are pilings.
the pilings. So we get those river
We
more
usually
plans
get a
with
big
these.
plan.
So,
Yeah, the structural drawings that are required for like the building permits, and usually we make that part of our NOI. Yeah, those are part of it, yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
Right.
sure.
And there's no new seaward side deck, correct? That's
There's-
one thing that,
No, it's just that patio I do believe.
Yeah.
The deck's on the north side of the house
Yeah.
and the west side. It's a
Yeah.
patio on the,
Yeah, it's
The
one of those
ocean side.
it's
cement
already
lines.
exists. Yeah.
It's
Correct.
already there.
yep,
And that was just replacing what was there before.
that was really my big comment was about the structural drawings.
Yeah, it's just a small one. You could get us that, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody in the audience for Fetty? I think we got
Yeah,
everything. I think having the structurals.
yeah, we'll make it. So I make a motion to
Well,
close.
We can
continue
close.
based on the structurals, or
I think we could close and just,
condition
it needs to be part of the conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Get those to
Yep.
us, please.
Yep.
Yeah.
I make a motion to close.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion.
Motion,
second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry. Keep me on track here. Crary, 85 Glades Road. On August 6, 2018, 6:35 PM, the Town Hall, Situate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 4 of the Mass General Laws and Section 30700, Town of Situate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Doris M. Crary and Dennis Bador, I'll get it right someday, revocable trust to raise and rebuild dwelling located on property at 85 Glades Road, Scituate. Abutters and interested parties are invited to attend.
Again, for the record, Gregory Morse, representing the property owner and applicant, Doris M. Crary and Dennis Badori Revocable Trust. This is a very similar application. It's a raise and reconstruct of a single-family home located at 85 Glades Road. Familiarizing you with the plan, the property line is shown in black. Glades Road is at the bottom of the page. The resource areas that we have at the site, off locus to the back, we have a salt marsh, which we've depicted in blue. Extending off of that is the 50-foot in red and the 100-foot buffer in green. You'll see that the proposed, or the lot is located between the 50 and the 100. There's no work inside the 50-foot. That's all off locus. The property itself is also located within FEMA floodplain. It's an AE zone at elevation 15. What we've proposed is we've proposed to take down the existing dwelling and construct a new one. The outline of the new dwelling is in red on my plan. You'll note that it's in the same general location as the existing footprint. It's a building that's 10.25 feet wide by 38 feet long. It would be elevated up on piles above the floodplain. Floodplain's at elevation 15 in the proposal is to have a first floor at 18 and a half.
That is one tiny lot.
Well, it's hysterical down there. There's a whole bunch of them right there.
Yeah, well, they all used to be little cottages. though.
Well,
It's like-
that's what they were meant to
And
be.
they were
You
all
come for
owned
the
by,
summer
like-
and you go home on Labor Day.
Yeah.
We included photographs of the site in Appendix C. It's a narrow house.
This could be on tiny homes on,
Could be.
on PBS.
Well, it's 38 feet long. I mean, it's
Yeah.
long.
There's no change in the topography. The utility services would be cut and then reconnected to the house.
So it's going to be on pilings. It's still going to be 2 stories on the pilings?
2.5 on pilings.
Yeah,
correct.
so it's going to be way up there. So once again, we don't have, at least I didn't get.
You did not get a piling layout with
Yeah,
this
so
plan.
we do
So
need
we need
that.
that as a condition.
Other than that, I guess I'm okay.
So the
Hey,
septic system is on the neighbor's lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's in an easement.
In an easement.
hey, listen, they did what they
You do
had
what you have to do.
Well, they were being neighborly.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Years ago, you used to be
Done a lot of
neighborly
work
and
on
help your neighbors out. Not today.
No questions.
Lisa? Jen? You know what, Craig, I didn't ask on the last one, and maybe not on this one. Sometimes we look at erosion control, and then we're in places where it doesn't necessarily do a lot because it's all cobble or whatever. I'm just wondering, I mean, is there any, you're so close to everything here. Any fencing or anything that would be beneficial in terms of keeping the work on site I can't imagine there's going to be any real overwash that would impact the marsh.
Yeah, we didn't propose any erosion control per se.
There isn't
just
much
because
room.
we're not digging or changing topography. It's the driving of the piles.
Right, you're going to ripping out a building and a foundation
Correct.
and then doing some grading.
Foundation is.
It's probably just either
I bet it's
timbers
on a
on
slab.
grade or a little cinder block foundation. It's not a significant foundation.
No.
Right.
The neighbors down there are all close with property lines. We'll certainly be staking those out, whether there's construction fencing or if you do want an erosion control, we could certainly place that. But that's going to be closely monitored, I can guarantee
So
you that.
flat.
Yeah.
Water
It's-
I mean, I'm not seeing erosion control would be helpful,
Silt
in-
fence maybe.
but either a silt fence or some sort of fencing to kind of keep that contained. And I think that was something we probably should have put in orders on the other one for Fetty as well. There should be something at least keeping that contained. Obviously, we don't want to see debris. Our concern, the neighbors can almost deal with each other. Our concern is more that stuff isn't going off onto the beach or into the marsh or
Sure.
Out there.
stuff like that.
So if you wanted to include a condition that a silt fence be placed along that line, certainly that to encapsulate any of that.
I'm assuming you're gonna need some area in back of the house to stage some stuff as well, I guess. I don't know how the hell they'll,
Oh, they'll use the street.
Fortunately, the property owner owns the abutting property number 87, so they'll be able to use that for staging.
okay.
Good.
All right. Anybody in the audience for that one? No.
I make a motion to close.
Second? Somebody?
Somebody second
Oh,
it.
second. I thought you said second.
From somebody.
Okay.
I can't second it.
You can't second. It's second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Riajan, 23 Oceanside Drive, fill and lawn after the fact.
Yep.
On August 6, 2018, 6:45 PM, the Town Hall Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Alfred Riajan regarding after-the-fact notice of intent for placement of fill at a dwelling on property located at 23 Oceanside Drive, Scituate, Mass. Others, abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Mirabito, representing the applicant and owner of the property, Alfred Voyage. And just to give you a quick summary of why we're here, back in late March of this year, the applicant did file an acknowledgement of emergency repairs following the Winter Storm Riley, which was issued by the DEP. And subsequent to the placement of fill around the house, which is shown in brown on the plan, there was a disagreement as to the amount of fill that was placed, and the commission issued an enforcement order accordingly. This application is a after-the-fact notice of intent for the fill that was placed around the house on the two side yards and in the front yard. It's also an application to do work at the rear portion of the house where he wants to restore a lawn and put approximately 6 inches of loom in the low area. This plan I prepared shows the outline of the lot. This is the rear portion, which is a lawn. This area is surrounded by an 11-foot contour. The grade here is 10. We're proposing to add 6 inches of loom in this area here and reseed that entire area. The area that was filled after the March storm is in this area here, and what they did was to fill from the front up toward the front of the house and the two sides. The reason he did that was to put the elevation of the land up high enough so he could lower his insurance premiums from FEMA. There was a lawn there before, and when he finished the filling, he did put a lumen seed lawn back on top. There's a photograph in the NOI that is submitted. It's the last one, and what it shows is on the northwest side of the house, there was a set of stairs going up to the house. This is prior to the fill. It's this picture here. And if you notice, there's a series of steps going up. What they did was to fill about 4 risers.
Yeah.
Assuming a riser 7.5 inches, that'd be 30 inches, the fill that he put up against the house. And he also filled up to the whiteboard just below the windows. Then from there, he graded back toward the street and his side property lines. There's also a row of builders, there's also a row of stones, boulders that he put on top of the existing row that was in this area here. There's no fill placed on the outside of his property line. This isn't an area of land subject to coastal storm flowage. The DEP does not have any performance standards for doing work in that zone. The elevation of the flood zone there is elevation 15. The lowest part of the land is elevation 10, as well as the abutting property. So on a coastal storm, you'd expect the water to be about 4 to 5 feet above the lowest portion of that lot, both this lot and some of the abutting properties. Under your Scituate wetland regulations, there's 2 performance standards that we have to meet, which we do. One is where the activities in land subject to coastal storm flowage, the fill will not increase the elevation or the velocity of the ocean flow. Likewise, the proposed fill will not increase ocean flows due to a change in drainage or flowage characteristics on the locus, adjacent properties, or any public or private way. Again, the reason is that that land at the lowest point is 5 feet below the floodwater elevation. And the second performance standard is that there are no new structures or impermeable paving being proposed. There is some pavement behind the house shown in gray on the plan. That's the existing driveway. That's going to remain in place. Again, just to recap, the purpose of this application is to allow the work in the backyard. We're going to put 6 inches of fill in there and restore the lawn. And then the front yard is after the fact permission to leave that fill and lawn in place. So with that, I'll end and answer any questions you may have.
Well, Penny, a second, and maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Don Nagel. I'm counsel for the applicant.
Thank you.
For the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. First, Paul, the fill he wants to put in the middle of the backyard, that will just make it level with the outside border of the backyard?
No, it'll actually be 6 inches lower than the level. This is,
Wait a minute, okay.
this is the elevation 10 contour here, and the 11-foot contour comes around like this. What you do is add 6 inches of fill
Yeah.
in this area, so this is not as a deep a bowl, and then,
But it will still be lower than the outside edge?
yes.
Right.
So the water should not,
Well, the water will still be contained there.
that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm getting at. I don't want the water.
It's a bowl.
All right, so you're bringing it up, but it will
Would-
still...
Everybody will have a chance to speak. The order is that the
Yeah.
commission members go first. I'm sure there's a number of folks that want to address this, but it's commission members, the agent, and then we'll take input from the room. If we get disruptions in this, it's going to take longer, and at some point, we'll cut it off.
And then my other question is, there is, I'd say, a good 3 feet around the house, the front, the side. I mean, there's no step anymore. What the concern is, on the sides, the water, not so much a storm, but just rain and stuff. Is that running? Is it staying contained in the yard, or is it because he has made a little hill, let's face it, it's, a grade up to the house? Is the water running off into the neighbors or to the street?
Okay, what he brought in was loam to fill, and he does have a lawn surface on top of it. The lawn is fairly pervious,
Yeah.
so we expect most of the rainwater to go down through the lawn and into that thicker loam layer, which has a fairly high perk rate. The elevation of the land on the south side here
Yeah.
is still elevation 10. This is low, which runs into the back around the house. This isn't changing. The place he put the fill was from here up, and he
Yes.
filled some of the front yard over here.
Yeah,
This is the lane, which actually, is a level. It
Right.
actually runs back and then toward his yard, so we wouldn't expect any impact from any rainstorms out there. Again, this isn't that subject to coastal storm flowage.
no, I understand.
Right,
We
okay.
get a storm and the water's running right across there. All right, let me ponder this, Doug. Thank you, Paul.
Well, what was there before the fill? Was it just an exposed,
This lawn,
was it a vertical concrete wall for just the exposed foundation? What was there?
Yeah.
If there was
Picture.
30
That's a picture.
before?
Yes, that's prior. And now it's up to here.
So there's skirting underneath before,
See?
but you had to fill up against something. So.
Well, they went up
It's the fill is up a stone foundation.
to the foundation.
Okay, so that's what I was trying to get.
Right.
So it's a stone foundation, not a concrete
Correct.
foundation.
Yeah.
So I can see
That
where
was
that
the
would,
original.
that would be beneficial to the applicant. I wasn't concerned really with rain runoff as much as flood from, if there's less capacity in their yard, then do we have an increased capacity of storm flow onto the abutters? If it was vertical before and now it's filled, we have less capacity. I know everybody probably gets flooded, is my guess. And I can see where this is a benefit to him. My concern is it a negative impact on the abutters. In a storm situation, not rainwater, I was thinking of a flood situation. Because in a minor flood, he's up at elevation 15, he's higher than the abutters' houses already. So does it increase flow onto the neighbor's yard in a flood event?
No,
That's
once,
my question.
once that water comes in from the ocean, Doug, it'd be up to elevation 15. And, and it's just not on this line, it'd be that whole section in the neighborhood. And the grade up against the house on the contour is 14, it's 13 on the sides. So he could have a foot of water up against the house in some places. The first floor of that house is 15.1, so theoretically, the water wouldn't go on the first floor.
Right.
But he didn't want to going underneath because he'd have a lower level. And that was the problem with the flood insurance.
So by blocking the water from going into the
Blocking the
lower
water
level,
from going into the
it actually
basement.
saved him flood insurance?
Pardon?
That FEMA allowed a reduction in flood insurance based on that? Yeah, no, it's more of just a volume
Right.
issue that. And
The
I'm not-
volume's not a concern when you're in tidal flows, the land subject coastal storm coverage. The performance standards address that, in the sense that there are no performance standards. Under DEP and under your local rules and regs, those two performance standards that I mentioned have been met.
So you're not filling up like storage, like rain storage, as if you're talking about a stormwater event, and you're filling.
I'm not thinking of
lands up to flood.
compensatory flood storage or anything
Right.
like that. I think we have probably some people here who think that this is a negative impact to their property. So I'm just trying to get ahead of that a little bit and trying to understand if a minor flood does water doesn't have to always go up to 15. If you've got an overflow there and there is some flooding, I feel like he's on a nice little island there and he's more protected than the abutters. Does it increase water going on to them? So there's an increased impact. Not that it's going to save them from flooding. That's my question. I'm just throwing it out there because I'm trying to get ahead of the rest of the conversation, that's all.
Right.
So but that's it for me. Right.
Lisa?
Questions I was gonna ask, already been asked.
Jen?
Same.
Amy?
Same, actually. So, well, a couple of things. One is, I guess my biggest concern is probably diverting stormwater flow, and I just want to make sure that the applicant demonstrates whether it is or not creating impact. And then, so if we do work through this, we also need to address, there's a cease and desist currently on the property, so we need to talk about what will happen with the cease and desist.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to open this up to the audience. What I'd really like to get to is, I don't want to have repeat input. I'd like to have clear input concerns from the neighbors so that we can address those. And I know a lot of people are upset by what's been here. The commission's frustrated with it as well. So we'll take input, but I'd like it to be in a fashion that hopefully you could have a question that the commission could answer or address or express your concerns so that we can move through this hearing. So take any input from abutters or neighbors. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Beth Whitcomb. I'm at 27 Oceanside, so I'm the low driveway in that lane.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I'd like to address the storm water issue, not the flood issue that Doug brought up.
Sure.
Because I sent these pictures to folks. I don't know if you got them.
If you have anything you want to put up here, we'll keep it in the file.
These photos are just from a rainstorm in June.
Yeah.
Did you see these?
Well, I did at the time.
So this is just from a rainstorm in June that was it was a Saturday afternoon, I think, a couple hours of rain. That is his property and the runoff into my yard and my driveway. That's pretty substantial.
Okay.
And it's not a winter storm.
Sure.
That's what my, oh. Goodness.
Anybody else?
That's your driveway?
That's my driveway.
The big flooded?
And that's the lane that he described in between. And I think the runoff comes down the lane into my local.
Sure.
So, just to follow up, and I'm not being adversarial here, I'm just trying to say that, so you're saying that didn't normally happen, so this is an increase?
It would happen with a heavy rain, yes. I would say if we got an overnight, really good rainstorm, my driveway would flood, not to that degree in the lane, to a degree, but that's a Saturday afternoon, couple hours of rain. That is not anything like we've ever seen, and I've been there for 12 years.
So in your observation, your anecdotal, you're seeing an increase in
Runoff,
just from a rain event?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Was it seeded at the time?
It was in mid-June, so I guess it was seeded, I don't know how taken it wasn't dirt.
But that would make a little difference. It would.
Yeah, not,
Not that much, but it would.
okay, so you at name and
Hi,
address.
I'm Damien Brozier. I live at 72 Kenneth Road. I am also on that lane, back up to that lane. The flow of this water was based on a second set of rocks being set aside that right side. So seeding or no seeding. There's a second, I'll show you the pictures.
Yeah, the second set of rocks.
So this is off of Mr. Boyagin's website. Okay, so this is this is May of 2016, where there's one row of rocks.
Right.
And there are 7 steps.
Right.
7 steps
They're
up to the
gone.
door.
Yeah.
And they're gone.
Yeah, this one.
Okay, so this is the side on the alley coming down.
Yeah.
This is the storm. The house was not flooded. The first floor living was not flooded.
No.
This is it today. There's a second row of stones in the alley that pushes the water down. There's a second row of stones along the front of Oceanside, which turn the water down that lane, down towards the houses to flood out. When they add the 6 inches in the back, that's gonna disperse another 300 yards, I don't know, what, for every 1 inch of grade you raise, how far does it go left and right? So that is gonna add left and right. The emergency, this is a elevation cert for that property,
His house.
stating that the lowest elevation of equipment is 8 foot 4 inches in the basement. So in regards to reducing your flood insurance, I don't know, 8'4" is what his heating system is. I don't know how adding fill to the outside of your house reduces your flood cert. So, or your flood insurance. This is again, Stephen is right, so that's the house.
So could you, to me, just, is that from a flood event or a
That's the
rain
day.
event?
That's March.
Okay.
That was the
That was
storm.
the actual storm that we're using as the basis of emergency repairs to the property.
Gotcha,
And
okay.
that was the day taken from my house.
It was 5 back-to-back major high tides.
Yep.
Yeah, but this is the one that they gave the emergency opportunity to fix your house was based on this one, 3-2.
Sure.
So,
Okay,
okay,
thank you.
yep.
We all know it went overboard.
Someone else?
Chris Bagley, 47 Montauk Ave, directly about it, front section of Mr.
And your last name, sir?
Bagley. Basically, I'm just retracting back. Are we moving forward from the emergency declaration that DEP spoke? Is he moving? Are we not addressing that anymore, or is he resubmitting something new, not going out the tail of the DEP?
So, the applicant had given us notification that they were doing work after Nor'easter Riley in relation to the governor's declaration that they could protect their property. In addition to that, they did other work that we felt went beyond the scope of what was allowed for that storm. So they received a cease and desist order. What they've done now is made application to the commission to keep what they've done.
So there's a letter of intent that was submitted after they started the work that was on the
It's
first
after
sales
the
of
fact.
posted.
Right. So this is what we call an after-the-fact filing. They're now,
So I'm just trying to get to, DEP thinks it's a wash now, we're resubmitting another
this,
So basically, there's been violations, I wanted to see what's transpired on.
so what we look for when we give a cease and desist, we feel that they've done this incorrectly. Then what they do is what they've filed tonight is basically they're coming in and saying, the work that we did is allowable for X, Y, and Z. And that's what's in front of us tonight. And so the process is that they make application, they give us plans. We'll consider all that. At the same time, we want to hear from folks like you that feel where this is not correct. And then the board or the commission will consider all that information and try to make a decision as to where this should go.
The cease and desist was, you know, at the tail end, like 2 meetings ago, at the tail end, it was kind of like, said that you didn't want anybody mowing that property in the cease and desist.
No.
We're well,
Aware.
yeah, we're familiar with what happened there. I mean, I was out there with the police.
It happened today too, by the way.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we,
Okay.
um,
I got a couple questions, sorry. You said the lowest point on that property is 5 feet above the median tide, or is that just 5 feet above grade?
the elevation of the property, Paul.
Elevation to deep in the front yard, it says under 5 feet.
What's the question about the elevation?
Was the lowest elevation of the front part of the yard, I think you mentioned it was 5 feet above, is it above the median tide?
What's the elevation of the yard?
Well, the lowest elevation on this side is 10,
Yeah, it's
which is on the south side of the
11.
lot.
Oh, yeah.
Of the nursing homes on Wapatuck Ave. And on Indian Lane, it's, the elevation in Indian Lane is 10. That's
Yeah.
pretty good. From Oceanside.
Yeah.
The house on the corner of Oceanside and Indian Lane there, that, when we show a grade of 11, the ground seems to be going up from there.
Is that above the median tide though? Like my house is 4 feet above the median tide, and that. front
These
area
these
on
elevations
Oceanside
are based upon the FEMA benchmarks.
But it shouldn't be flooding
It's it's on the 1988 elevation data, which is what the elevation certificate is referred to.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul, but it's like this area right here.
Right
The
there.
The lowest point was like 5
No,
feet.
no, the lowest point on this property, it's 12 here, then there's a 10-foot contour coming right along here on Indian Lane. And then you got the rocks that are about a foot and a half high, and then it goes up to 12, 13, 14 at the house.
So, I'm sorry, but is the footage, that measurement that you're attaining, is that above the tide levels, like the median tide level, or is that just from grade?
It's above mean sea level.
Median sea level?
Yeah.
Only because I was told my house is 4 feet, so I'm trying to find out how. I'm just trying to play it off in my head somehow.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Also, forgive me, I had some stuff, I had a timeline synced up with pictures that I wanted to forward. My Wi-Fi died, so I didn't know if you guys were going to close out anything or if you were going to keep on continuing. Had some sort of more information added. I know you guys have been inundated with pictures and so forth,
Right.
but I do have a concise timeline since I see everything, I'm right there.
Sure.
And I just didn't know if that would help in regards to any
I think we've got a pretty good picture of what's here, how we're going to move forward with this evening. We're going to take this information and then we'll see where we're at. But I think we've got.
And I just wanted to add one thing. I do believe that it will add to the velocity of the runoff.
Sure.
Take this gentleman's water sideways and see how it runs downhill.
Yep.
Yeah, it has increased a lot with the rain and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's about it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mike Wolter, 41 Wapatuck Avenue. And I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to offer before the commissioner guys, because I think that, I can't really speak for everyone here, but cumulatively, we are extremely frustrated with how this has been evolving, I guess. And it seems to me that every time that you, with the cease and desist order, and every time that you try and bring this gentleman in compliance, let's say, he is extremely resistant in just the inability to comply to any of the requirements and the restrictions that you've placed before him so far. And I think a lot of the concern that my wife and these other families possess is that if it's okay now, we just don't understand what recourse we have, because I think it is plain to see through the photographs that we have been looking at 2 or 3 times now, that number one, this does change the current flow of the flood water. And because the island, let's say, is so much higher now and wider, it's changing the velocity, which I think is the problem for a lot of us. I mean, we never really experienced water in our house. However, now it is channeled through my property and John's property, where it's as deep as my chest.
Sure.
And it will knock you off your feet with the speed that it's traveling. I mean, it knocked me off my feet once this year, and I've been there for 30 years. I mean, I know about the water and the floods and how to pay attention and so on and so forth. However, this is making it extremely more volatile.
Mm-hmm.
Every time now that we have a storm surge high, Damien, all the way down to Beth, and then out back with me and Allison, all the way down to, Chris's house and Lee's house across the street on the other side of Wampatuck Avenue. So I didn't have a lot of information to add. However, I just want you to understand where our frustration really lies
Sure.
here.
Yep.
Because we have called the police so many times that they are no longer sending a car out, and they are noticeably frustrated with the calling for a non-criminal act, I guess is
Right.
the only way I can really put it.
Yep, got it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Elizabeth Barrett, I'm 43 Wampatuck, right next to Mike Nelson and Don. And after the storm in March, all of us, I think I can speak for all of us, did repair damages to our properties. The difference, though, is that we didn't build an island around our house, because that's frankly what happened. I'm not an engineer, I'm a teacher in high school, but even I know when you increase land, water comes down, it goes down. We know that. We have had additional erosion on the north side of our house at the corner that we did not have even with the severe flood. And at the stairs, I think we have pictures. We didn't expect any of this to happen, so we didn't always take pictures. We didn't know some of it.
We've got pretty good documentation.
But we are frustrated. Mike said it very well. There's been no consideration for neighbors at all. None of us would ever think of doing this. This house is now an island, and it continues every day.
Sure.
And I have 2 children.
Yeah.
This is scary. This is scary.
Right, and we appreciate your frustration, and certainly we've watched it go on. I've been out to the site as well. We've given direction to the applicant more than once, and the commission takes that very seriously, and we're trying to get to this in a function that we can. At the same time, they need to be afforded what's due them with this process. So oftentimes we'll have this hearing, we'll look at what these violations are. The applicant can come to us and say, well, we think that everything that we did here is in accordance. It's an after the fact. Theoretically, they should have come for permission to do this. They didn't, so the process would be that we have this type of hearing. If we feel that this work is allowable and we can condition it, we can do that. If we don't, we can give them direction as to what to do with it. Then the process of getting them to comply with that goes on from there. Just going to express a few things right off the bat. And you know, when we have a storm like Riley, it impacts everybody. And water flowing over damaging people's houses. I've repaired a lot of those houses in the past. I'm pretty familiar with what happens in that area and the flooding that occurs. Is hard. It's hard for everybody, and no one needs to have more problems put on them. And when we look at things as a commission, we look at these applications, we say, are people in some way impacting their neighbor with the work that they've done? And I personally think that has happened in this particular location. One of the things that's really frustrating is that the governor gave a declaration that people could take and be able to fortify their home or repair it. The idea would be if a seawall was collapsing or their foundation was being eroded or something like that. And my personal feeling is that this applicant used that process to skirt what should have been a typical hearing. He used that declaration to go in, and he could have put some material directly around his foundation if he thought that that was going to collapse. But in no way did that declaration allow him to do the work that he did, in my opinion. The amount of fill, changing of that wall around the property, and all that goes way beyond, in my opinion, and I believe that will hold up with DEP, what was supposed to be allowed in that declaration. When someone takes that opportunity to do that, I consider that a real issue. And we will look at this hard because, we know that people want to protect their property. We know that they want to try to keep it dry, as some people elevate their home. We could tell people they could elevate it, but when they start to add a lot more fill around their property or add walls or things like that, what impact does that have on others? And it's quite clear how much, I think it wouldn't be hard to quantify what he's done here. And I think I asked that question of Paul when we were here before, is how much material was in the backyard? Did we have any plans or any sort of information? And we asked that information get to us before the applicant started to grade his yard or do anything more than that. And he flagrantly went out and continued to work in his yard beyond when the commission told him what to do. He was told to stop, do no more work, get a plan to us, show us what he was going to do, and he just continued to do the work in the face of what he was told to do. So we're not taking any of this lightly. One of the things that's hard to understand, and I'm hoping that Doug and Paul can enlighten us a little bit more on this. When you take an area that goes under, so this isn't a velocity zone, is how this is viewed. This is an area that the water goes up and down in an area with flooding, and I think it's pretty clear that the smaller events like that rainstorm, the work that he did can certainly have a negative impact on the abutters. I don't see how anybody can sit here and tell me otherwise. You raised, to your point, you raise an area around that water's got to go somewhere, and it's going to be shed onto your neighbors. And in that case, the applicant should be compensating for that in some way, either drainage or whatever else happens. But this is also in a flood area that once the water gets extreme, it really doesn't matter. It's going to go up, and it's going to be above everything else. So in a sense, once we get to a certain event with a storm, this whole area is underwater, regardless of what someone's doing around it. And so we're going to start to split some hairs here on what's allowed and what isn't. And I think that's where the discussion is going. And this is kind of involved, and we've got other things to do tonight. I'd like to hear back from the applicant a little bit more on how they feel about this, and then we'll see where we go from here tonight. Okay?
Can I just ask one question?
And your name?
I'm Allison Bolger. This is my husband.
Sorry about that.
With all the blatant disregard
Yeah.
this man has done to us, to you, to the whole community. My concern is, he knows he's not supposed to be doing anything.
That's what
What are you going to do if he continues going forward from tonight on? Whether it's mowing the grass, whether it's cutting a flower, how do we know that 6 inches is going to be 6 inches? And how do we know that he's not gonna come back and, throw loads of, truckloads and truckloads and truckloads of bloom as we're calling? Do you know what I mean? What are you going to do to prevent that for us going forward tonight? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm concerned that he's just gonna add more and say, well, we'll wait till we hear what they decide.
Sure.
And so I'm just kind of putting it out there to say, how can we stop him? Because he's,
I don't know.
Well, we're in the process here now, and you've, experienced the same frustration that we as a commission feel sometimes. We put enforcement orders on things, it's been told to do that. We go there, you make a call, one of us will show up. We've been there with the police department, they're told not to. I can't give you a great answer for that question. I think we've been through this. I'd like to hear back from the applicant, and then we'll decide where to go from there.
Frank, just for the record, I want to point out, when we got involved in this, all of the fill you see there had been placed and the lawn was loomed and seeded.
Yeah.
We don't know what the exact contours of that land was prior to the filling, but we do know that along Indian Lane, this front part here, these grades didn't change. We also know that the land did slope from here up and from the street up to the front of the house. I mean, it wasn't at 14. Just guessing, it was probably around 11 or 12. But that's one point. The other thing is that if you look at the area that the fill was put in, which is this area here, from a stormwater point of view, and I'm not talking about ocean water, the surface is still a lawn, it was a lawn before. That's an extremely small area relative to doing stormwater calculations. The volume of water that would come off of that site in a rainstorm, a lot of it would be soaked into the lawn. But the volume of water that you're seeing in those pictures is way more than what could ever come off of that small drainage area. There's other points of entry for that water you see in the pictures.
I understand.
There's a driveway here. The applicant pointed out to me in the storm, there's a lot of water coming around the back. And you can see how this was flooded. This whole area was flooded. But again, in a rainstorm, this is a small area. I'm just talking this area here. You would never get the volume of water coming off of that small area that you saw in those pictures. So that water is coming from.
Well, we saw pictures of both the storm event and we saw from a rainstorm. Which one are you referring to, Paul? Are you referring to the rainstorm or you referring?
It's not coming, it's not coming, you can look at the
I understand,
driveway,
yeah.
it's not coming up into the Rockford County.
Okay.
I mean, the ocean storm's the ocean storm. There's nothing you can do about it. But from a stormwater point of view, I'm just saying that is a very small area, and it is a lawn area, so not all the water is leaving that filled area because it's a lawn. And the volume of water you see in some of those pictures is way too much for anything coming off of that small area. And that's the only area I'm talking about. Everything else is the same.
Do you want to add anything else to this?
If I could just say that I know the applicant isn't the favorite of you guys.
It has nothing to do with a favorite. We're
Right.
talking about someone that's we feel has done violations here without, and I don't see how that can be denied.
No, but what I wanted to say is that in enforcement, first of all, he came to this commission to ask, what's the approval process for doing what he wanted to do. He was told to go to DEP. He went to DEP, he got an emergency cert from DEP, and understanding that the scope of what he did, I understand the commission believes that he put in more fill than he told DEP or told the commission initially. And so that's why we're here. You folks issued an enforcement order, which required an after-the-fact NOI. And that's all we're doing. It's not
understand.
any more complicated than that. The plans that Paul has proposed, I'm not a technical person, obviously, but I think
Do
it
you have
does.
a copy of his application for the storm?
I do,
I believe I do, yeah.
I do.
Can you tell me what he applied for?
Well, I believe it was two, in terms of the volume of.
No, what was it? Give me his application.
Well, I have the DEP emergency cert. Is that what you're asking for?
He made an application or gave information to DEP for that, to get that.
But not expanding.
Didn't say 4 feet full.
Yeah, as I'm looking through it, by memory, he wanted to put in 2 feet vertical and 6 feet out. And I think Paul's plans show it's like 2.5 feet and what, how many feet out, Paul?
More than 6.
More than 6, maybe 8 or 10.
He overextended.
He overwent it,
everything.
right. And
So I'm gonna,
Yeah.
this is a recap of all the different applications for the storm piece, right? So for Mr. Bjorgen, it's backfill home, stone foundation, prevent basement flooding, was what he requested of DEP. Not to fill in a whole yard or raise a wall around the yard or anything like that. It was supposed to put material directly around the house to prevent flooding in his basement.
Yeah, I'm not here to argue that this commission shouldn't have issued an enforcement order. But what I am trying to point out, to remind the commission and the audience, is that he did what you guys asked him to do. He filed for an NOI.
I understand that, and then we can look at it and decide if what he did here would have been permissible.
Right.
And if we think it can stay, or we think some should be changed or altered or removed, that's part of our process.
Yeah, right. And there's no performance standards under the act or the bylaw. And so the language that Paul read is really all we have to go on. And Paul can articulate this better than myself, but the bottom line is, it's the ocean. It's not rainwater we're talking about.
Excuse me.
And there's nothing you can do about the ocean coming in and going out.
I do have a question. Why, all of a sudden, after, you can say how many feet of fill, I'm saying it's up to 3 feet in the front of that house, and it's a hill, okay? I'm not gonna, but why, all of a sudden, since that, are the neighbors being flooded? I don't hear anybody here saying, oh, we've always been flooded during a rainstorm from this house. There's an issue there. I'm not saying he doesn't have a right to do some filling. He went about it backwards, all wrong. And when we gave him cease and desist, he did that all wrong. He did what he wanted. So the neighbors are very unhappy. But all of a sudden, we have flooding from a rainstorm. To me, we got fill, way too much fill around that house, and now there's flooding. Prior to that, yes, you have your ocean storms. Your ocean storms are going to run right down that street. Mother Nature will do whatever she wants. But all of a sudden, in a rainstorm, they're showing me a driveway that's flooded like that. I think there's a little, they kind of go together. So there's a problem with that. The amount of fill this man has put around his house. So I'm not saying he can't have some fill, but I think there's definitely a problem he has created with the amount of fill he's put in there. That's my feeling.
Can I'm not sure we're going to get to the bottom of this tonight, and I had asked for some information before, Paul. You're telling me that you can't figure out how much material was added.
I could come up with a,
I mean, I'm looking at these pictures, and I'm looking at a grade on the foundation, and I can see a grade on
Yeah.
the street, and somehow somebody could make some reasonable assumptions. You could kind of put together a topo of
I
what
mean, sure, yeah, I could
pre-existing.
do that. I mean, short of going out there with a machine and digging the thing up and seeing where the existing lawn is.
I mean, that's another way to do it, is that we could
Yes.
say, forensically, we want to know what the grade was on this yard.
But I think we could make some pretty reasonable assumptions. But the other thing, I mean, I'm happy to do that for you, but to answer Penny's comment, it isn't the amount of fill, it's what's on the surface and where it's going and the volume that would come off of that particular surface, once the fill is there.
So
I mean,
my point would be this, is if you're gonna give us an idea of how much fill was placed here, so we know how much water theoretically could be displaced in a conventional rainstorm to some degree. You could tell us that. I know that I was there at one point, I looked, there was a drain structure in the road that doesn't seem to function. I don't know whether that's a town drain or a private drain or whatever it was, but I know the same things happened down in the Sandhills. There's a series of drain structures that,
is that drain in Oceanside?
it's in the middle of this way.
Indian
There's a
Lane?
storm drain in that lane.
Right.
Little lane.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that goes into a dry well or if it goes into some piping or whatever, but, I mean, that drain could certainly be part of the issue with some of this flooding. But I think what's important for us to know is how much material was placed both in the front yard and the backyard, and then get some idea of how much water that displaces for regular rain events. I'm not going to argue with you that when this is all flooded, that the work he does here changes a lot. I mean, we deal with this stuff in marshes or whatever, and we look at the total area that's being flooded. When it gets to that stage, 100 yards of material it just doesn't matter. But it does matter on a more ongoing basis. The other part that would concern me, and I know this isn't a velocity area, so that deflection of that water, but increasing these walls around this property is essentially diverting some of that water that flows over Oceanside away from this property. And that water's got to go somewhere. So it's going down the driveway, and it's going into the neighbors' yards on either side of them. And I'm not sure that we don't have some jurisdiction over that.
Well,
I believe that part of that says that we do when it comes to flow. So you can set me straight if you want.
You talking ocean storm or rainstorm?
Ocean storm.
Both.
Well, I'm talking about an ocean storm.
Yeah, but then you already said there's nothing you can do about the ocean storm.
Well, no, that's
flooding,
with
yes.
regard to flooding, but when you divert the flow of that water, that's different.
But, right, so the extra layer of stone along the border of his property makes the rainwater flow down that street, down that side road significantly more. Because it's not going into his yard anymore, it's a big barrier.
Come back in
Yep.
a month.
Your name?
Because what
I'm
you're gonna do
sorry,
is put in a
Amy
berm wall
Berger,
in here,
72
and
Thank
do
you,
some
Amy.
drain calcs in here.
But he has those huge tubes
And then come
coming
up
off
with
the
some
top of his
mitigation
house
on
now, have you
site.
seen those? The big, huge, they're like that big, like gutters that are pulling water off the top deck. And they're big PVC, and that's going right out. So you talk about a rain event, that water's then coming down, rolling down that hill. They're huge.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the house was impervious before, so water that comes off the roof, whether it comes off onto a downspout or if it goes off onto the ground, we call that impervious surfaces. I don't believe there's any new impervious surfaces. He didn't pave any driveways, he didn't create anything like that. Well, what I would like to get at, in my opinion, is two things. I want to know how much yardage was added so that we can know how much water during rain events was displaced, and then B, I want to look at this wall that was created around the house and see if that adversely affects the folks around there.
Something is.
Is that,
What about in the meantime? In all due respect, what about in the meantime?
In the meantime, we're gonna get through this. I mean,
But we're living this every day, and it's just, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right.
It isn't right,
For
but
good neighbors.
I don't know what
It's not
we,
right.
I don't want my house to end up at the end of the road again.
I mean, what do we do? Should we all build walls around our house? I mean,
oh, please.
okay.
We wouldn't do that to our
we
neighbors.
would not do that.
No.
but-
We're gonna go through the process that's due to these folks.
Oh, gosh.
All right?
So we're gonna continue, how long?
Is there anything else that you feel you can put into this, or you want to add, or any other?
No, what I'd like to do is ask for a 30-day extension, and we'll
30.
come back with some additional information,
Will you
some
tell
of what you're looking for, and perhaps more.
Well, and I don't know if this helps or not, but it's like I'm going to try to prevent Paul from going through too many gyrations as far as trying to, the elevations. I do have some historical elevation data in the area, and with his contours are matching right in with that. So approximately elevation 11 went through that lot up to 11, about 12. So his estimate of 30 to 36 inches of fill is really right on.
So
I don't think.
So what does that equate to in yardage?
I think that the real question, if you can quantify, Paul, would be, I know what you're saying. If you were doing drainage calculations, they're going to be minimal, but it's a really small area. What they're observing, I can't not believe that these people have bothered to come out here on the night if they're not serious. And I feel really bad that somehow the neighborhood has been disrupted this way. I wished he would have been a little bit more courteous to his neighbors, but there's a mound of dirt in there that wasn't there before, and it obstructs the water flow to some extent. I don't know how you can quantify that, but I don't think we need to get off on a tangent about arguing about elevations, because I think your elevations are right on. So
No, I agree that it isn't the elevation, it's the impact of the water coming off of that, we'll call it a mound.
the mound, right?
Yeah.
So I think that to focus your energies
Right.
around that,
And in the backyard as well.
and not
I'm not disputing the water in those photos. Picture's worth 1,000 words. What I'm saying is that, where's that water coming from? And all I'm saying, to keep it simple, all of that water is not coming from that small mound. It's coming from somewhere else.
I agree with you.
Maybe some of that water is coming from the mound, but that's something that I want to try to prove or disprove.
And then what about the diversion of the water with the wall, Paul?
The wall, the rocks.
What you have to do is to look at the impact, if there is any, coming off of that mound and where it's going.
Wait for the next storm.
Well, and maybe a
Yeah, on any
solution
given
could
storm.
be in mind. So we don't come back and just argue about,
Yeah.
what we're allowed to do and what he's allowed to do, and there's a neighborhood of people here that are really upset. Really be nice to see that not happen. And maybe a solution, if you take a look at the kind of impacts, and is there something we can do about it? Is there some way to make their situation
Keep the water on.
not worse? I mean, everything floods out there. It must be tough for you. It's like
It is,
on a consistent basis.
that whole area is, well, I do have some thoughts about that I'll present the
Yeah,
next meeting.
I think that's what I would be
Look at that
looking for.
drainage that's in the road, is that
I
something
need to
that's
speak to my
repairable?
client as well.
It's dead. It's
Well,
dead.
let's, all right.
I see that, we're making some good progress here. We've got good commitment from the applicant filing the after-fact notice of intent, despite everything that happened. And I think it makes sense to, if you can lift part of the cease and desist, so that we can not argue about mowing the lawn. I don't see the harm in mowing the lawn, except it's established what he needs. He's gonna do it anyways. I don't see a harm in that. I know that, it's making good faith to keep moving forward. If things change in the other direction, it just falls away, then, we can revisit, bring it back in, but.
Well, I think part of the thing that happened before was that we had told him, what I wanted was for him to stabilize the yard, that
Right.
he has a violation. The idea was that we would stabilize that so there wouldn't be more silt and runoff. And the neighbor's point, our butter's concern was, so what's it? Now he's gone ahead and loomed it and seeded it, and now he's just gonna treat it as a yard, and you know, the chase is on, and it's gonna go on. So telling him not to cut it was just a piece like, this job isn't done. Right now, you're in a rough state. The idea was to stabilize his yard, not do any more than that. He went ahead and still got more loam and was dealing with the backyard. And I understand what you're saying. I mean, maintaining it as opposed to being a hayfield, what real difference does it make? But the problem is that this applicant has shown total disregard for the process.
Agreed, but he's also hired an engineer and a lawyer, and they're working with the commission to move forward and to evaluate what the solution would be. And I'm not so sure that telling him not to mow the lawn has any impact on this project.
Yeah.
And I know that my phone rings, the police, his phone is ringing, and, you know, I mean, either that or, the other hand, we need to get to the root of, if you want to enforce that, what are you going to do about it? Because I think there's frustration. So, one way or another, I think that should be spoken about.
As a neighbor, again, Damien Grosier, as a neighbor, that property is a rental property, and it has had an impact. The fact that he doesn't have that mode has changed the impact of people that have come in. And I don't want to make it an economic thing.
Yeah, well, we you know what, our purview is that.
Right, but the total disregard of the orders were given by this group is I mean, there's no teeth right now in the things that you want to try to accomplish. And the one thing that had teeth was the fact that you said you cannot cut your lawn and make it pretty.
It's not gonna
And that's about the only impact that's really come so far at this point from being here again tonight, was the fact that you that cease and desist, you can't cut the lawn.
Penny, can we help with something?
It's him, it's his fault.
Sorry. You're losing power.
I'm dying over here.
What do you need that for anyway? Should be
Keeping an
listening.
eye on,
Are you watching the game?
I've been watching the Red Sox.
No, it's night off tonight.
All right. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, the police don't want to be continually called and dealt with, and it's like, for what?
I'd like to go put him in jail for that. I don't know.
I'm still annoyed with this whole piece. I want to work with this to get it resolved as well. But
Why is he continuing to cut his lawn?
Pardon?
Why is he continuing to cut his lawn?
Doing what he wants. I mean, he just
I
totally
mean, he knows it's
disregards
an
us.
enforcement order.
What's wrong with
Why
him?
is he
I
cutting
don't know
it?
the answer to that, Jen.
I know.
well, it was the same as the grading and stuff. As soon as as soon as we stopped, then there's filling in the backyard and grading taking place right in our face. And I guess that's the part that I'm saying, I don't really feel the need to bend much on this.
No, you know,
Not to tell him not to cut the lawn is a big deal.
He still does it.
I think we should just leave it alone.
Yeah, I'm willing to just leave the enforcement alone.
Just leave it.
You get back to us with the information as quick as you can.
okay.
So you want a month out? You want to go to September 10th? Okay, I'll make a motion to continue. 23 Oceanside Drive to September 10th at 6:20.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Barbary, 58 Crescent. On August 6, 2018, at 6:50 PM, the Town Hall Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Kevin Barbary to raise and reconstruct an existing single-family dwelling, install an in-ground pool and landscaping and minor grading at a dwelling on property located at 58 Crescent Ave, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening. Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks.
Did you meet Nick Lanny?
Yeah, we did. Hi. Good evening. I'm Bill Arnberg. I'm here with Kevin Barbary tonight. It's Kevin and Debbie Barbary's house. I'm also with Paul Marabito of Ross Engineering and Nick Lanny of MLA Associates, who's our soil scientist. And just before I turn this over to Paul, basically, Kevin and Debbie, as you can see, they want to raise and reconstruct a home. They're building a home that's actually, footprint is smaller than the other home. This is an existing disturbed site that's all lawn. And also as part of your plan, who couldn't be in, Sean Papich did a very thorough planting plan and landscape architecture plan. So, turn over to Paul.
Okay, thank you. This is the site plan that we submitted along with the landscape plan, which is also in your packet. The drawing to the left is the existing conditions plan. The lot is 19,885 square feet. Right along the rear property line is the top of a coastal bank. The coastal bank, for the most part, is on property owned by the town. To the east of that, there's a fairly steep bank and then the stone revetment in this area here. There's also an existing hedgerow along the rear of the lot, which is going to remain in place. This is the existing condition, and this is the 50-foot buffer from the top of the coastal bank. This is the 100-foot buffer. This is the existing house with the sidewalks and the hardscape going out to the street. In the proposed condition, the proposal is to raise this house and build a smaller house showing this footprint here. Again, this is the top of the coastal bank, the hedgerow, which will stay. The lawn area that's in here now will stay. There's also a proposed detached garage. There's a pool going in a cabana. The area around it would be landscaped with patio blocks. There's a driveway with pervious pavers going out to the street, Crescent Ave. The only work for if you were to compare the hardscape that's within the 50-foot buffer zone right here and compare it to this here, you got this area of the house and this area. Some of these are pervious, some are impervious. Where this is a coastal bank, I point out in my narrative, the coastal bank serves one of two functions. Either provide sediment to the beach below, which in this case, there's no beach here, it's absent because of the revetment. And the other is that it would act as a barrier to storm wave action. The velocity zone is elevation 18. The top of this bank is up at 55. So the velocity zone on this coastal bank could be about 28 feet lower in elevation. Nick Lanny is here to talk about the impact of having a house on the stability of the coastal bank. That's the other performance standards. Any work here cannot do anything that would destabilize the coastal bank. And I think at this point I'll turn it over to Nick Lanny, who is a soil scientist, who will be doing the borings out in this area. And he is familiar with the cliffs in Scituate. He's done quite a bit of work on them in the past and present. Would you like to address that?
We've done a number of projects on second and third cliff. It's primarily glacial till, which is a very dense mixture of sand, gravel, silt, and clay. Expect to find the same soils here. As Paul mentioned, the proposed house is actually smaller than the existing house, so we're really not changing the weight of the building on the soil, which has been called the state of stress. Also, it's very far back from the coastal bank, so any stresses on the soil from this house really aren't going to affect the coastal bank at all. We're doing borings on Thursday to confirm that it's glacial till. Any changes will in the design of the foundation.
Did you want to mention the weight of the soil
Let me
versus?
say, yeah, the weight, the building, the weight of the building isn't changing, it's actually about the same. So there's really no change in how much stress is being exerted on the soil. Plus, it's far enough away from the coastal bank, but any stresses from the building never reach the coastal bank. They're dissipated with probably 5 or 10 feet from the building. So if you go out here and measure the straight stress in the soil today, and after this building is built, it'd be the same or less.
Nick, while you're standing there, and I'm a little bit out of order, but is the new house having a full foundation?
Need a full basement?
Full basement?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The garage is on a slab, as well as the cabana.
On that note, Frank, okay, it's a smaller house footprint than that's already there, so what are you doing with the rest of the old basement?
Most of that house doesn't have a basement.
Yeah, whatever's there, we would fill in with, we'd backfill around the foundation walls.
Okay, okay.
So that's, I've always wondered why you have to chase that flood zone all the way up a bank like that whenever it intersects. So that's that's what you're looking at, the stress of the weight pushing out.
Yeah,
and
if you put a building here,
yeah, right. You
you'd
could
be
dam.
pushing on
And you could stress the bank itself
They
and
call it stress bulb. If you look at a footing, the stresses go out in shape of a bulb.
Is this, so there's some sort of cone or bulb
Yeah, the
that,
bulb, so if you get really close to a slope, then you have to consider if that would push on the slope and destabilize.
so
We're so far away from the slope that we're not gonna have any
Yeah.
effect on the stability of the slope with the building.
I can't imagine. So I just have a funny question, I guess. There's an existing pool to be removed
And the new one going in.
and on the next door lot.
The next door lot, Doug, has been
No, that's separate.
That's a separate, it's not subject to this filing.
Oh, so that's not part of this filing?
No.
Okay, so that was what was confusing.
so that's what you must have, you've
So that's not
subdivided
included
this.
in the
Yeah, it's
calculation?
been A&R'd, it's at the land court.
So that pool was
It's got
part of
nothing
the-
to do with it.
That pool was part of the old,
Got it,
Yeah.
got it. It's just leftover text on the
It's,
plan.
it's anecdotal.
It's anecdotal. So
You can have 2 pools.
in your impervious calcs, Paul, those are for the entire lot, correct? Not just
Yes,
the,
that's for
those
lot,
those were way too big just for the buffer
no,
zone.
that's just for lot 1.
So you're required to show for the whole lot, not just what's in the buffer zone?
The calculations are just for
Yeah,
the locus,
No,
right?
the
No, I'm saying,
calculations for the,
yeah, those numbers are conservative highly if you're looking at what's in the buffer zone.
no, the impervious calcs are for the entire lot area of
Yeah.
lot 1, and it has to do with the stormwater.
That's what that's for? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was within the 100-foot buffer zone.
No,
actually.
no, it's for
Nope.
it's for the entire lot.
Everything, the whole thing.
Okay.
Lisa?
So, the house is gonna take up less space, there's a reduction in the house. What is the land developed under where the garage is going? Is it disturbed?
Yeah, it's all lawn.
Yes.
It's all lawn and
It's all
walls and,
lawn?
yeah.
And is the garage gonna have a foundation?
Slab.
No, it's just a
Slab.
frost wall with a slab at grade.
So as far as, what is the percentage of reduction of,
No, there's more.
the house and?
I don't have the number for the
Increase.
reduction in the size of the house.
For the total?
The total, I don't know, but, I mean, the reason they're tearing it down is because it's too big. It's just a couple and they wanted a smaller house
Is the increase.
and a separate garage with it.
But
Right
that's
now,
a
it's got a, I think it's a 3-car garage that's inside the house. That'll, they'll remove that and have a detached garage to the left of the house.
It's all within.
Jen?
I had the same question as Lisa, but it sounds like we don't know that.
Yeah.
Well, you can see as far as the structure, there's a good amount less structure within the 50-foot buffer. That's what you can see. It's pretty clear just looking at it.
Amy?
Right, so you guys have permitted projects similar to this on
Yeah.
Crescent Ave. And in fact, we permitted, one within the last year, just at 94 Crescent, for example, was a raise rebuild, similar type of circumstance.
Right.
So it's a buffer zone to a coastal bank, is the resource area. DEP did issue a number, no technical comments. Just wondering about ZBA approval. Does this have to go through ZBA?
Nope, we meet all dimensional setbacks and all the dimensional requirements.
It is a sensitive area though, so I did observe from the order for 94 Crescent that special conditions that you considered with that lot pertain to native plantings
They already
along
have
the
the hedge.
bank area, and also a small infiltrator for a rain garden at the end of the driveway to give additional protection to the coastal bank. And also to make sure that the stockpile was shown on the plan, so identified the stockpile location. So, I don't know, all in all, I mean, I think it appears to meet the requirements of the Wetlands Protection Act, and, it goes into the 50-foot no disturb, but it seems to be a tree as to what's already encroached.
Yeah, it's already out there.
Frank,
This last house.
we did the work at 94 Crescent Ave.
Mm-hmm.
That was at the bottom of the hill at the low point.
Right.
There's a big swale coming down to it that Mass Highway put in 1955. The back of that lot was actually in a flood zone. This one here is 30 feet above the velocity zone.
Right.
And the backyard has been maintained as a lawn with the hedges, so
Yeah.
it's,
already have those
it's
hedges,
pretty
yeah.
flat. It slopes from elevation 57 at the top to 55 down by the proposed pool.
Sure.
And the grading is gonna be less than a foot, and mainly because of the landscaping. But everything else is staying the same. And again, we're gonna keep that hedgerow along the back. That actually is a safety feature as well, keep people from going onto that bank, because it is a steep drop.
Sure.
And plus, this hedge is well established, so your
Yes.
roots are, I mean, you don't want to touch that, it's the roots holding the bank.
Anybody in the audience that wants to speak to this? Didn't draw much of a crowd. So I'm pretty familiar with the property. Did a lot of work to the existing house over the years, including some erosion work on the bank. We had, I think it was Stan Humphreys that did some of the work back then, and I think we had GZA do a series of borings along there and kind of already confirming the glacial till. In fact, I'm not sure, did you ever work with GZA?
I've worked with, not for them, but I've worked with them.
But I'm almost thinking that you might have worked on this project before, but, we kind of gone through those process, and you're right, the bank is, I think, the biggest concern for the commission. It's been stabilized before. I actually happened to walk that seawall a couple weeks ago with one of your neighbors. We took a walk, we started at the southern part at Second Cliff and walked all around and seen some of the erosion that's occurred. And I think the neighbors know that they've got some issues that they're gonna have to deal with regards to this. Some of the vegetation that's actually on that slope isn't great. It's not weed or poison ivy, which isn't really well the root structure's not great, but I agree that the soils are really dense. You're not putting it up on the sand pile or something like that. And it's a decrease in the area. The other part I think we dealt with, Paul, was sort of like runoff from that house either onto the street or back over the coastal bank, because that seems to be the thing that was most detrimental to that bank, was if there's additional water running over the bank, it's going to scour the bank and do that. The time that there was failure on this bank wasn't a storm, it was actually a lot of really heavy rain, and kind of the conclusion of the engineer was that soil got so water laden, it got really heavy and there was sloughing on the bank itself. And I'm not sure that there's much that's in our purview that deals with that. I mean, that was sort of the conclusion that they came to before. It's just the makeup of that cliff. The good news is it's really stable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. How about the driveway, Paul? Is there any issues with runoff from that driveway towards?
No, the driveway is gonna be pervious pavers.
Okay.
That's from the that's from the landscape plan.
Sure.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I've got all the information I need.
Yeah. I make a motion to close.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
67 border?
That's me. 67
Oh,
border.
are we on, extent, on the?
Oh, we could do one or the other, I guess.
The agenda is
Actually,
We want to do the request for amendment, because that is a new thing, then the other stuff all goes under old business. So just do request for amendment, that'll be quick.
Good
And
job.
we'll go into the,
For
old business items.
67 Border Street?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just a quickie.
yeah.
Yeah.
You received a letter from Mrs. Martin, where she
Did.
outlined some of the changes.
Yeah.
If you recall, this is what we had proposed originally. The existing driveway started here, and it came in back into this area here. And what they proposed was to come in with a driveway, bring it up over the ledge, and have a large cul-de-sac in front of the house. The grade of this was just below the first floor, so they would walk up just a few steps to the new house. The new house also had a proposed garage in this area. They had these outside decks. What they're proposing to do is to get rid of this and use the existing driveway, which should be modified. It's in tough shape, it needs to be rebuilt. This goes, this deck goes, and what they're gonna do is, they're not gonna build this house. What they're gonna do is to keep the existing house, which they're living in right now, and they're going to raise this. This is the footprint of the existing home. What they'll do is to square this off to have two small additions, and they're gonna have the garage under. And we're gonna come in with a driveway into the garage. There's a portion of the driveway in here that's gonna be turned into lawn area. And we have a smaller cul-de-sac coming up to here, because the access to the first floor of the house will be up these stairs. They're gonna have a set of stairs going up to an open deck, which will go into the first floor of the house. There's an open deck in this area right now, and they're gonna use that. All these decks are off the first floor, which is at elevation 23. The ground elevations are around 11 or 12 in this area. So all these decks are off the first floor. They're about 8 to 10 feet above the ground around it. And what they're gonna do is they're gonna have an open deck here. They have a small one here now. This is open deck, this area here. This is the sidewalk coming into the house now, which they'll get rid of down at ground level, and they'll have an open deck off the first floor. There'll be a set of stairs coming up from the marsh. And they have some kayaks that they take out into the river. They'll have a set of stairs coming up. In the previous submittal, we had
You said this was gonna be quick, Paul.
Pardon? In the previous submittal, we had that long concrete retaining wall,
Yeah.
that's gone. We had the garage with walls around it, that's gone. This is all lawn. This is all earth and fill with the lawn area, so it's a big change.
Hallelujah.
So we're asking you to agree that we could file for an amended order of conditions as opposed to a new notice of intent. This is quite a substantial change.
The driveway.
Well, if the limit of work, I mean, the only thing that it looks to me like the existing house is closer to the marsh than the proposed project.
If
Right.
They're gonna keep the same footprint.
I understand, but they're looking to add,
Got rid of the garage.
What they're gonna do right now, you got sidewalks, you got walkways. Right now, you got a walkway down in here. You got these decks here, there's the deck here outside. This walkway is gonna go at ground level, and you'll have an open deck above it. So they won't be using any of the ground area here. It's all gonna be off the first floor decks.
what's in blue, Paul? Is that a deck?
Yeah.
Pardon, the blue's a deck, and the only access to the deck is from these stairs
Got it.
here or over here. So there's no access to this area other than by coming down these stairs.
Okay. I mean, it all seems within the scope of work that they had before, and it's minimized.
Yeah, it's actually a lot less scope of work.
Whatever it is.
Minimalized.
Minimalized.
This is good.
Penny?
I'm thrilled. I like it.
Doug, you thrilled?
No, I think we should make them build what the other one was.
Oh, geez.
No, I'm gonna abstain, because I know nothing about the
You know
project.
nothing about it. Hush, hush.
And I don't wanna waste everybody's time getting me up to speed.
No, you don't
I'm
need
fine.
to.
Jen?
Yeah, sounds good.
Really?
You're gonna get all the same information that you would get with a new notice,
Right.
honestly. So it's just, it's what you're foregoing fees.
Yeah, no, I,
Okay, I mean, you've got a really good base for this project. I
Oh,
sat
yeah.
down with Mrs. Martin for a pretty long time. We went over the project, they're eliminating a lot of fill. And they want to try to keep the
Yeah,
natural
yeah.
lay of the land and just work with what they have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that essentially you're just gonna be accepting the new, revised site plan, and Paul should be giving a more
Got
detailed
it.
analysis of it at the public hearing with butter notification. So,
They'll
I mean,
eventually
I
get
think
things done.
it meets the amendment policy.
so you're saying he's still gonna be before us with this?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, we still get to
next hearing.
visit.
All right.
Wait, I thought you already had an order of conditions.
He does, but
So
they're
it's for-
amending it now.
So when you amend the orders, do you just wanna do a butter notification and let people know that the project is changing substantially?
But then he still has to come back and,
Right.
He's gonna come back
So-
again.
So this request can be
You don't
done with
remember
this
this
little
stuff?
presentation or just a letter.
Right.
You just
I
ask
didn't-
us, do you want to take it as a request for an amendment, or do you want us to file a brand new NOI?
No.
Okay.
So we're letting them use the same DEP number where, and it's actually more work for the staff, honestly, to amend an order, but in this case, I mean, we do it. And we do it out of courtesy for the applicants because
Yeah.
it streamlines things.
Okay,
all right.
sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Harris at 160 Chief Justice Cushing Highway.
I'm Bill Arnberger. I'm here with Chuck and Linda Harris, the owners of the property, and all they were asking to do was to extend the order of conditions. They purchased the property probably 2 years after the fact. I was in before the commission before. They're doing a small fraction of what the original order said. They're basically restoring fire damage and making the existing foundation and house habitable. I know Chuck's been, Amy's been helpful, giving them some guidance on some things. So very simply, we're just asking to extend the order so they can continue their work and then move into their new house.
I have no problem with that.
No,
Do we
given
need
the
to vote?
timing, the orders were out there for another applicant, and now they're working on the project, so
exactly.
we have no, I don't see a problem. I'd take a motion.
I make a motion that we give an extension to 160 Chief Justice Cushing Highway
For 3 years.
for 3 years on the orders.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you very much.
So, and I appreciate, I met with Chuck and Linda out there about a couple of things on it. I think that they're working hard to get this property together. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You got a beautiful piece of property out there. They're gonna let us park.
So the next extension is for 51 Surfside. So this was a multi-address. Whoa. This was a multi-address.
Guess Bill didn't like getting shifted
Order.
behind Paul.
No, that's the way that door behaves
Oh.
sometimes. Actually, right. We're involved in this one in some ways.
Sure.
So there's is it one order for 5 addresses on Surfside. We were asked by the owner at 51 Surfside to extend his address, so there are 5 different orders, 1 number, same project.
Make a motion.
I make a motion that we
Right.
give a 3-year extension on 47, 49, 51, 53,
No,
55.
no, excuse me, hold on.
Okay.
Just 51. The thing is that
Well, why does it say all?
currently 47, 49, 53, and 55 have not been recorded. So you can't extend something
Oh.
that's hasn't been recorded. So that's a procedural thing.
Okay, so
51 has been recorded, so we can extend the one that requested. It's complicated.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to assist the other 4 owners in promoting them to record their order so that they can extend their order, because otherwise it's going to lapse,
Sure.
and they'll no longer have an order. So
Oh, that's what-
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, then I make a motion for an extension for 3 years.
Sorry, Penny, you didn't have the red line version, so.
Oh, well, that's okay. 51 Surfside Road.
Only. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
right, okay.
Thank you. Orders of conditions?
Yeah, wait a second. I make a motion that we
Greg,
accept.
you waited this whole time for that?
I didn't want any questions to pop up.
Yeah,
Have a good one.
Thanks.
me too. I make a motion that we accept the orders of condition for 17 New Driftway, the sewer pipe as written.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Question about that, did the applicants get to read those? Did they read those? Like, did Greg read the order of conditions before we vote them in?
Yeah.
So they don't have a chance to?
No, they have no say. Those are our orders.
Right.
They're not
your
his,
order.
they're ours.
Yes.
We decide.
Okay, so
Okay,
if
we're
if
boss.
there was something in the conditions that they didn't agree to in the hearing, then how
Then
would
they
they
gotta appeal it.
respond to? They would
Yeah.
have to appeal it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
just understand the procedure.
That's okay.
Well, which is why it's good to engage in conversation about what you think you want for special conditions. So
During the hearing.
that, you know what I
Because
mean?
I've gotten surprised before.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we try to make sure we touch on all the bases, because I think if we throw additional conditions in that we haven't discussed or
We should
whatever.
avoid doing that.
Yeah.
Well, we try
Because
to.
it's
Yeah.
really
Every so
grounds
often.
for them to appeal it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I make a motion that we accept the orders on 100 Lloyd's Road as written.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a motion we accept the orders on 7 Surfside Road as written. That's a request for amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
So who read them?
Okay, so those are all okay.
Any read them?
That was okay, huh? I read them. Richard and I read them. I don't know about anyone else, but Richard
Well, I didn't
is
get
here.
'em.
Yeah, they
Well,
come in the email.
you may, yeah, we have
Sure.
really high volume, so getting the orders to you may have been tardy, so sorry if you didn't
That's
see
okay.
them.
Yeah.
But I
much
can,
before-
Yeah.
I can try to keep that in mind when they're being written and request them, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Typically, we like to get them out at least Thursday before the meeting. But as
The
you know,
special
we've been in
orders.
transition.
The rest were all
Yes.
standard.
Okay.
Okay, there's like 50 standard. That-
Yeah, and
Okay.
most of it's
Standards, yeah.
boilerplate.
Oh,
Yeah, I know,
exactly,
I know.
exactly. So I just always go right to the back.
Certificates of compliance?
Okay,
And as a group, I mean, you don't vote on them, I just
No.
Right.
recommend.
No.
So I'm gonna recommend for
Fieldstone, okay.
reasons being that they appear largely complete in accordance with their engineer's statement, that you, that you sign off on the CFCs that we've, prepared for you to sign tonight.
Okay.
All done. Okay.
Anything else?
No, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have any
Wait a minute,
minutes?
are we gonna torture this guy somehow?
No.
Yeah, we are.
What's he doing here?
It'd be awful nice if you tortured me.
No, we don't engage.
Don't engage with
No,
them?
not tonight.
Did you bring a check?
Oh, we're not gonna have my discussion tonight?
What's that?
We already discussed it. You were sleeping.
When do we
He's
discuss it?
105 Hathaway Road. We done.
Heatherly Road. It's not even on here.
Yes, it
What if we
is.
vote?
Oh,
There's no votes.
oh, yeah, there it is.
No, I don't see is that. We don't vote on those.
So you just recommend that these,
I
you are,
recommended as a group
Yeah,
that
these are in compliance? So
Yes.
those projects are done?
yes.
So you're issuing a COC for all these four projects?
CUCs with the exception of the one that is listed as partial. So there's
That's
one partial that
105,
that
that's
you've already,
partial.
yeah.
Mine doesn't say partial.
Well, I know it's a partial.
105 is a partial
No, it's on his.
with an escrow.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't get
Bring a
the
check?
red line.
No, I didn't bring a check, that's what I thought I was gonna discuss here, which is
We're not
why I sat all
discussing
night
it.
long. I know on April 23rd, there was a discussion about how much money was gonna be held in escrow for all the wetland replication that we're doing. We didn't touch the wetlands. The plans didn't show us touching the wetlands. What we have is a site triangle for the planning board where we're doing a knotweed treatment. And the only condition on the Conservation Commission is that we receive yearly reports from Politan Ecological on their treatment of the knotweed. So what we've done is held off on the knotweed until people are living in there so that it lasts longer because it's just a site triangle. And it's about 10 feet wide by about 160 feet long. That's a triangle, so it's about 800 square feet. And somehow we came up with $3,500 for Politan to do the 2 reports. We had $20,000 held already by the town for the completion of the project at the planning board level. And I'm
that's
just
not
wondering if I
us.
have to hold it twice by 2 different departments.
That's not us. Excuse me, my only thing that I'm gonna say, CSCs, partial CSCs, in all honesty, I'm not crazy about them, and I'm not, this is no reflection on you, Stephen, but we have had other partials, and then the rest of the CSC never gets done. So, we decided back in April, we would keep some money in escrow for the not, and this is a perfect one, the not need, you're not gonna do it until everyone moves in. I wanna make sure it gets done.
And actually, my interpretation of it is that there's 30 bushes, knotweed, 2-year monitor, stormwater sign off by the town engineer. That's all relative to this number. So I think that I was trying to be generous with 3,500. I was actually thinking a higher number, but I toned it down. And the lawyer,
You'll get done.
project seemed to concur that that number was acceptable. So that's what we put in the letter that we wrote a couple weeks ago to facilitate a closing.
Okay, stormwater is handled by the planning board under the common driveway. It's not handled by the conservation.
It's still written into our permit, Steve.
But it's handled by the planning board, and I have to respond to the planning board as far as the completion is concerned. And all my as-built plans for this project have to go to the planning board. What we did for conservation is built a detention basin in a 50-foot no-build zone. And as a matter of fact, that was actually inspected as well by the planning board. And I think the term that they used was the drainage basin grass looks phenomenal based on a site visit. So
I met with the planner last week and we reviewed that in October was the last time they had been out to inspect and there was not a sign off on stormwater. And just of note, this is really not a topic that's a discussion topic. It is, we decided that we would issue the partial at your request, but we don't typically engage in detailed conversation about setting the amount, so.
We always do that in Scituate.
I don't know anything about the project, so.
Then why
Okay.
did you open that?
Mine
All right.
still said, I was
I don't
wondering why
see
he
it.
was
Do I have a
here.
motion to close?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor?
Pay attention to me.
Aye.